Marvel. Immortal. Can I obtain the ability of the others when they hit me? Chapter 21. Click. Su Chen stepped forward with his right foot, and completely trampled on the steel robot that was still moving after falling to the ground. Perception plus 10. Nian motive force plus 30. Awakening. Super distance touch. Awakening. Low light vision. The infinitely mutated genes have once again found an evolutionary direction. The invisible sneaky steel robot could not be detected just now, but Su Chen now has evolved corresponding restraint characteristics. There were ripples in his clear, black and white eyes, and shimmers shimmered. Soon, not far from Su Chen's side, a figure of a robot that was also lurking in the dark revealed its traces. This is not available in the past. Not only that, in order to further restrain this kind of stealth unit, Su Chen's perception has also undergone a transformation, that is, ultra-distance touch. Tactile sensation is the change of feeling caused by human skin contact. The ultra-distance touch is naturally the invisible and invisible perception that can give oneself a certain amount of feedback on all objects that pass by. Just like now, the perceptual power spreading behind him outlines a slender and thin figure of a man in Su Chen's mind. He holds a samurai long sword high in his hand, and is stepping towards him step by step. The katana slashed to his neck. Kang! At such a critical moment, I saw that this completely invisible samurai sword was completely grasped by Su Chen's right hand suddenly stretched out. The killer who completely exposed his figure from stealth, didn't know how the other party could see through his whereabouts. He is puzzled. I also didn't understand that Su Chen, who was a few seconds ago, couldn't see his figure at all. It was because of the stimulation of sneaky robots that he developed restraint characteristics. But what made him feel even more panic? The opponent's grip is terrifying. Boom! The samurai sword that was slashed towards the neck, cast from Edmund alloy, was easily squeezed by him. Seeing that the opponent just turned around and felt the strength of the enemy's body was a bit exaggerated, he immediately hid in the air again, and quickly escaped from the attack range of the person in front of him in a state of invisibility. Not good. The opponent's cold eyes were full of sarcasm, and the attention of his eyes fell completely on his body, as if the teenager had completely seen his invisibility trail. Boy! The masked killer sneered at this moment. Do you think you are special? Next second, his figure disappeared completely without a trace under the ripples of the invisible space. Interesting. Su Chen's indifferent face revealed the meaning that if he was interested, could the enemy who was killed suddenly be able to teleport? It's too late to say, then it's fast. A terrifying wind hit from behind again, and the killer figure teleported behind Su Chen took out another slender blade from his waist, and slashed at Su Chen's back. However, when this extremely sharp blade fell less than a few centimeters on Su Chen's back, it was resisted by a weak wave. Its swaying and falling power is also slowly disappearing. The killer only feels his own wrist weakness, and suddenly realizes that the other party has swallowed his own power. He cursed secretly again, and within the next second, he completely dived into the space and disappeared from Su Chen's field of vision again. It runs really fast. Su Chen frowned. This moment. Around him, a flashing teleportation figure greeted him. He kept looking for the vital points of his body and shot. When he was found, he could run fast and disappear into the air in an instant. Is this someone from General Stryker? Tony, who was soaring in the air, was also slightly surprised, but he soon realized who the spoiler came from. In the area surrounding the nuclear explosion, all personnel had long since been emptied, and all the personnel arriving now were all reinforced special forces. There are many superheroes among them. The first to take over was a special force under the name of General Stryker. In the past, the brothers Wolverine and Saber-Toothed Tiger had worked for him and joined this special force. Now, after mastering most of the mutant X genes, General Stryker even hatched and created a large number of elite soldiers. You must know that most mutants have only one ability for their X gene. The existence of two or more mutants like Qin Zhelei who showed telepathy and mind power was very rare, and this was still the development of Phoenix's power. However, the newest type of X-weapon soldier, under the hand of General Stryker, successfully blended a variety of superpowers. Stealth, teleport. The killer in front of him kept jumping in Su Chen's field of vision with ease. We took over the scene. On the ground not far away, several military armed vehicles stopped and walked off a number of figures wearing black vests and suits. General Stryker was worried and did not dare to arrive at the scene. Of course, an X-weapon unit under its banner has already arrived. Su Chen naturally didn't know that the people who came suddenly were all under General Stryker. But he now knows very well that the battle is urging him to evolve quickly. Especially under the stimulation of the enemy's various abilities, his infinitely evolving undead physique is like finding the direction of mutation, opening a new transformation in the body. Awakening. Space exploration. In a short time, Su Chen's clear black and white eyes once again ushered in a brand new change. This time, he can see the materialized spatial structure around him. The warping, folds, crevices of the space, and other conceptual structures fell in his eyes, and the figure hidden in the folds of the space was also captured by him. It's really noisy. Despair. Su Chen kicked the ground with his right foot, and the ground instantly cracked into a pit, and he saw his figure advancing as fast as a cannonball. Die. The broken blade that he had just grabbed by his right hand penetrated into the void in front of him. It was a coincidence that the assassin who had just teleported here was as if he had died personally, pressing his forehead against this broken blade. Puff. The high-quality Edmund's broken blade penetrated his head like this. This is impossible. He didn't understand what had happened until he was about to die, and his consciousness was so completely blurred. The whole person died suddenly. The assassin didn't know how the other party predicted where he would appear in the next teleport until he died. Too difficult. He went directly to hell with confusion and incomprehension. Jarvis, did you notice what happened just now? Sir, I can't get the insight for the first time. Tony Stark, who soared into Yukong, frowned. There was an unsure understanding in his heart. It seemed that the young man on the ground was constantly learning in the battle, absorbing nourishment from it, and beginning to evolve. This idea sounds incredibly absurd. But when I thought of this young wanted criminal, he started to face the trance of the teleporting killer to suddenly violently kill. That one is very spicy, that one is determined. It made Tony feel very cold in his heart. Maybe this enemy is more difficult than he thought. But no matter what, with the arrival of the people under General Stryker, Tony could only helplessly stand by in the air. The enemy is a bit weird, everyone needs to be careful. The personnel who got off the military armored vehicle quickly entered a state of alert. It's okay, I promise he will be a meatloaf soon. A bloated waist is like a wine barrel. The fat man laughed strangely. There was no greeting at all, and he rushed to Su Chen not far away along with a thin man beside him. At the same time, a psychic energy that could not see a trace of fluctuations only eroded into Su Chen's mind. Su Chen frowned. At this moment, he suddenly felt a surge of spiritual fluctuations in his mind, which plunged into his head like a sharp needle. Not only that, but a harsh sound wave attacked his ears. It's a pity that such a sonic attack that can penetrate the eardrums of others has been completely immune since the last time I faced General Ross. As for the mind attack, less than a second, his infinitely evolving mutant gene has transformed into a restrained corresponding ability. Awakening. Mind barrier. The pain of the heart that pierced his head like a needle disappeared. Even the mental fluctuations that tried to tamper with his own will were completely isolated by an invisible barrier in his mind. You have a lot of abilities. Su Chen's indifferent face showed a hint of interest. What he likes the most is to fight against the capable. The Banshee and the Mind Catcher looked at each other, but they didn't even dare to believe that their combined attack was directly neutralized. But the pain that the other party endured just now didn't seem to be fake. The Soul Catcher frowned. Boom. The earthquake trembled, and the fat man who looked like a wine barrel in front of him slammed in front of him. Little devil, let me get down. The guy codenamed Fat Fatty stretched his fat hand over. Although he had sensed that the Mind Catcher's attack had suddenly failed, the scene before him was not enough to stop him from attacking. For an instant, his physique suddenly skyrocketed, as if the fat all over his body suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, a giant monster several meters tall came into view. Fatty's ability is super endurance, the monster that claims to be the most capable of resisting blows. In response, a thin figure shot out from the diagonal stabbing, and he was the most critical killer. Compared with Fat, Su Chen's combat instinct is a clear feedback of crisis. Obviously the unknown ability of another person is dangerous. Roll. Su Chen's thoughts moved, and a majestic thought force gushed out, directly bombarding the fat giant in front of him. The fat-filled physique of the other party directly sank and trembled. Inexplicably, all the power that fell on his physique was removed. The air cannonball that was enough to completely shatter a heavy tank, but only shook it back. More than 2 meters away. The power of thinking begins to change. Su Chen ignored the fat boy. A serious face looked at the figure that had been killed on his side, and saw a very surging force of disintegration emerging from the opponent's arm. Decomposition Master. His ability is to break all tangible and intangible matter into the simplest molecules and atoms. Su Chen, who has no trace of fear, did not show a trace of cowardice. On the contrary, facing the enemy who was killed, Su Chen, full of fighting spirit, rushed towards the enemy like this, full of energy, and the power of thought formed an invisible coat all over his body. He raised his fist and slammed into the killer. The thin man who came. Boom! The man in front of him was suddenly knocked out like a tattered doll. Click! However, Su Chen's fist bombarded him and exploded a series of fine cracks, and a faint bloodstain appeared. You must know that his physique that has been tempered by a nuclear explosion is extraordinary. If it weren't for the power of mind, and the energy of the whole body added 2 layers of insurance, I am afraid that the other party's terrifying force of collapse will inevitably cause a lot of harm to him. The cells of the body begin to metamorphose. Body strength starts to increase. At this moment, the infinitely evolving genes of its own also began to develop resistance to it. The opponent is enough to collapse matter into the simplest molecules and atoms, then the molecular density of one's body will become more sophisticated, and the strength of the entire body will begin to move forward to a whole new level. And the fine wounds on the fist had completely recovered in less than an instant. Certainly, in this short period of time, Su Chen's motivation for thinking has also successfully completed a new transformation. Awakening. 9th Power Plasticization. The constructed system clearly informs Su Chen of the genetic information of the metamorphosis. It's over. His mind once again released the surging thought power. The fat who had been killed again in front of him was completely ignored, grinning, and he just relied on super endurance to kill him. It's a pity that the thought power fluctuations that blasted away this time began to be plasticized. The hideous and sharp thorns appeared in the air very indifferently. Thousands of spikes traversed in the air, completely hit the enemy in front of you. Puff! In an instant, the whole body of this fat was suddenly pierced by arrows, and the whole body was filled with blood. Such a change in the power of mind is beyond anyone's imagination. No, something is wrong. Looking at the young man who was constantly fighting and evolving, he seemed to think of something. This should be human at all. Finished. His imperfect body collapsed like this. The fat with super stamina and super endurance just fell. In the past, this fat and strong guy has always played the role of a meat shield in this special team. Even if it is a cannonball that is enough to blast through a fortress, it is still a precise bullet, and it will be completely bounced out by his fat skin. Even the most famous boxing champion in the world, with a full punch, can only be completely relieved of his strength by his fat body. But now, he fell, as if 1,000 arrows were fired, piercing his whole body with blood holes. As for another thin man who could destroy the atom, his ending was also ushered in. Nice ability, Su Chen praised sincerely. After all, after experiencing the nuclear explosion, he really couldn't think of any external stimuli that could stimulate his physical growth. And now, this guy has done it. The invisible power fluctuations began to condense in Su Chen's right hand. After the power of mind was plasticized, he directly fabricated a spear with indifferent traces out of thin air. How did you guy do it? The figure lying on the ground clenched his fists and said very angrily. In the previous confrontation, the opponent was unscathed. You need to know the ability of your own atom to collapse, but you can decompose all matter into the original atomic state. Decomposing everything is invincible, but the ability that was unsatisfactory in the past has completely hit a wall under the young man in front of him. And he himself was just an ordinary body of flesh and blood, naturally he couldn't hold the punch of the monster in front of him. The whole person collapsed to the ground, but it was difficult to move. Monster, what a monster! Su Chen ignored the aggrieved guy, his eyes fell completely on his neck. I saw that the skin there was covered with cracks from the operation, extending all the way from the back of the neck to the back of the head. Experimental body. Su Chen realized in a daze, where did these guys come from? He couldn't understand why these poor guys would work for that kind of beast. This made him very puzzled and very annoyed. Puff. Ever since, the spear in his hand penetrated his head. Your presence makes me feel sick from the bottom of my heart. It was like the last death announcement. Boom. As Su Chen's right foot slammed on the ground, his figure suddenly shot forward like a sharp arrow. Not good. The members of this special team suddenly panicked. A tall and strong man took the lead in the battle, and his ability seemed to have something to do with animalization. The whole person became a bit like a giant bear. Boom. It's just that his body can't stand the impact of a 13-year-old child. It was like a train running at full speed crashing into it, and his figure was suddenly knocked out hundreds of meters away. What? At the same time, screams continued to be emitted. It was a sonic attack from the Banshee. At close range, you can even see the sound waves set off violent ripples in the air. Su Chen, who was the first to bear the brunt, was like a okay person. You should do it soon. I have done it, the soul catcher said anxiously. Sonic immunity +1. Mind barrier +10. Su Chen calmly placed himself within their attack range. With his cold eyes, he also saw a slight change in the space gap at this moment. A figure descending from the space is about to appear behind him. When Su Chen thought, an invisible giant hand formed behind him. The figure that moved along just appeared, and was completely grasped by this giant hand. This performance of God's anticipation simply shocked everyone present. Another teleporter. Su Chen's eyes flickered with a chill. Was it such a coincidence that he encountered two people who were born with teleportation in a row? Let me go. The figure held by an invisible giant hand was struggling. His feet were completely separated from the ground and completely suspended. He tried to transfer out, but the sudden surge of thought momentum caused his body to be twisted like a twist, and his bones were completely broken at this moment. You should not be born mutants. Su Chen stared at the back of the head of the other killer. There was a centipede-like surgical stitch on the bald head. Needless to think about it, these guys are all artificially made superpowers, experimental products that came out of a certain laboratory. So you are all under General Stryker. Only the infamous Existence knows the Mutant X gene so well, and is very skillful in mass production of mutant abilities like an assembly line. It really makes me feel sick. Su Chen frowned slightly, the anger in his heart couldn't be suppressed at all. Under emotional rage, the ability to modify reality is almost as casual as breathing. Die all to me. Under an order. The mysterious force that interfered with reality just affirmed their death. Boom. At the same moment, all the people in front of Su Chen exploded without exception. The blood mist bloomed, and Su Chen, who was in it, supported and opened an invisible barrier to keep all the blood out. So you all belong to Stryker. Su Chen looked into the distance. In the already blocked area, more and more reinforcements have rushed to the scene. Roughly speaking, there are hundreds of people. After learning the previous lessons, the reinforcements rushing here are basically the elite of each unit. Many people have unique skills. Of course, if they were all under General Stryker, most of them were not eligible. But Su Chen, who is indifferent and ruthless, didn't tell them any reason. He didn't see what he did, and there were no visible energy fluctuations. Boom. The elite reinforcements in front of them covered their hearts in this way, and a terrifying mysterious force grabbed their hearts in this way, squeezed them hard, and quickly squeezed their hearts. Puff. The figures fell to the ground with a dazed look of fear. Until dying, everyone didn't know what the other party did. The terrifying power of reality modification just appeared unreasonably in front of the world. Died. Reinforced troops in front of them. They all covered their hearts under inexplicable circumstances, and then fell to the ground with a mournful cry. Heart palsy. Sudden death. Has everyone had a heart attack? Soaring in the sky, Tony Stark, who had been on standby, looked dumbfounded. Sir, this is exactly the same as the situation just now. An unintentional, mysterious power without even a little energy fluctuation caused their deaths. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Tony was very puzzled, and even his always indifferent face showed a solemn, even panicked look. This is a very serious blow to the existence of such a recognized global IQ among the top 3. Even Jarvis, the artificial intelligence butler, is unable to identify what kind of power this is under the big data of various occults and even the ability samples of various mutants. But what is certain is that every time this mysterious power appears, it is the time when this teenager has angry mood swings. What kind of shit analysis? Jarvis' words made Tony smile very wryly. Isn't this tantamount to telling yourself not to offend this young man? Should I coax him with a lollipop? Still use a beautiful toy suit to please him? Tony vomited. Sir, none of what you said is in line with the needs of 13-year-olds. Oh, I was wrong. After all, when I was 13 years old, it seemed that I was almost graduating from college. There really is no concept of other people at this age. The humorous Tony Stark still couldn't help but pretend to be forced. But now we still have to solve the problem. Boom. A gorgeous golden red suit just fell from the sky. Hey, man, I don't have any malicious intentions. In order to express that he didn't care, Iron Man spread his hands directly to the sides. Not only that, his steel mask also stretched in, revealing a middle-aged uncle's face full of vicissitudes and the carefully cut mustache. I know the reason for all this. The guy General Stryker brewed the beginning of all this. And you are not an extreme mutant at all. It is a crime of framing and grafting. You are just an innocent teenager who escaped from the experimental base and ascended to heaven. Facing such a mysterious monster, Tony swore that he would definitely use the most emotional language in his life to impress the young man in front of him as much as possible. Even without a heart rate test, Tony knew that his heart rate had increased a lot. Secretly, he also asked Jarvis to test the other's mood swings. After all, he is taking a risk. He is betting, no matter what, the other party is nothing more than a 13-year-old boy. In the rebellious period, the three views have not yet formed time. Looking at the opponent's blackened face, Tony felt that everything could be saved. The fault is not with him. All the evils originate from General Stryker. It stems from the persecution of mutants in this world. I can end it all. As long as I push a button, I can thoroughly expose all the crimes of that large snowfield experimental base to the public. General Stryker will also be brought to justice. Tony took a deep breath. On his right-hand side, there is a virtual screen with holographic projection projected into the air. The secret file that was directly violently cracked. As long as he had a thought, Jarvis would be able to spread it to the media and TV stations all over the world. The world will return justice to him. You are not a sinner. On the contrary, you can be a hero, and you can do it easily with your abilities. Tony swears that this is also his peak speech moment as a speaker. This is enough to impress him. The young man quickly changed his mind. Tony's heart was shaking. Sir, the other party's mood swings are not biased towards the index of anger, but unfortunately, he did not have any confusion or regret in your speech. In other words, his conviction is very firm. Jarvis' words suddenly plunged Tony's heart into the boundless ice cellar. Looking at the cold face of the other party without any mood swings, he gave a wry smile. He suddenly remembered that when he was 13 years old, he also ran away from home because of a little conflict. At that time, it took him half a month to be rebellious before he started to change his mind. What's more, the other party suffered so much. Furthermore, his strength is so unpredictable. Why should he swallow this breath? Do you think I need you to wash it off? After listening to so many wonderful speeches, Su Chen sneered at this moment, but his unwavering mood showed his firm will. The human beings in this world are so hypocritical, they always start to retain all this when they are suffering. If I had known this before, why bother in the first place? He doesn't need anyone's sympathy. No need for mercy from anyone. His strength is strong enough to ignore all this. Whoever makes his mind difficult to calm down, let his fists and strength tell him the consequences of offending him. It's not me who is wrong, it's the world. Roll. Su Chen said blankly. Boom. In less than a second, a majestic and endless thought-powered cannonball blasted towards the Iron Man Tony in front of him. Not good. He closed the armor directly in a haste. Unfortunately, this force is really extraordinary, and he completely tore the armor of his whole body at once, and the whole person's body was completely blown into the distant sea. It's not me who is wrong, and I don't need any salvation. Su Chen's face was cold. And this time, Among the pile of reinforcements that fell in front of them, there were more than 10 figures, gradually struggling on the ground. The people with healing ability are enough for Su Chen to understand. Sorry, he is here. It's just that the man in front of him is wearing glasses, gentle, like a middle-aged man dressed up as a university professor, but he looks at Su Chen apologetically. Less than a second, not only did his heart fully recover, the whole person's physique suddenly became bigger and giant. His green skin and knotted muscles undoubtedly showed his identity, Hulk. Roar! A snarling roar came from the monster in front of him like this. No one thought that the university professor who was gentle in the last second turned into a huge and tall Hulk at this moment. Today's Avengers naturally has not yet been established. It's just that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been sending personnel to contact the university professor. It happened that Bruce Banner appeared nearby, and under the leadership of strong curiosity and S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel, he rushed to the place where the incident occurred. Hulk. Su Chen naturally heard of the reputation of the monster in front of him. After all, Hulk had fled the world for several years, and escaped the pursuit of General Rose. Not to mention the young Su Chen, I'm afraid people all over the world have heard of Hulk's name. But I didn't expect this monster who once used a city as a playground to wreak havoc and killed an unknown number of military personnel, so he stood on the opposite side of him. This is naturally a very absurd fact for Su Chen. This world is not only the official slandering him as an extreme mutant, and vowing to arrest himself. Even the super criminals wanted in the world have to be their enemies. Am I abandoned by the world? Whether it is good or bad, does the existence of the whole world have to be enemies of itself? Boom! The earth was shaking, and every step of Hulk in front of him caused earthquake-like waves. Looking at the figures that continue to gallop, Su Chen's stern face is full of deep chills. If that's the case, then you go to die too. Whoosh! Facing the monster that claims to be the strongest creature on the surface, Su Chen didn't have a hint of fear at all. On the contrary, he was full of fighting spirit at the moment. The perplexed anger made his blood boil. Aren't you claiming to be an invincible monster? Well, I will use my fists to beat you to pieces. Boom! His figure suddenly slammed into the Hulk in front of him like a cannonball. Boom! The two collided in one instant at this moment. As if a meteorite hit the ground, a terrifying wave of power spewed out, and the terrible impact wave even caused substantial ripples in the air. Boom! At the moment of the head-on collision, no one thought that the aggressive Hulk was the first to be knocked out. Some of the survivors present were all dumbfounded. Even if they were implanted with healing genes, they couldn't guarantee that they would survive 3 rounds under Hulk's hands. The past record of this monster is truly brilliant. The military sacrificed many people in order to arrest him. It is a waste of tens of billions of dollars. But now he was completely moved by S.H.I.E.L.D.'s words. He came back white. Also be beaten. Su Chen's punch just hit his face hard. Roar! Hulk roared unwillingly. He stood up quickly from the ruins on the ground. His terrible resilience made him look unscathed. What's more amazing is that as Hulk's anger and emotions continue to rise, his strength also rises. Unfortunately, Su Chen, who didn't care about this concept at all, came in like this. As if he was not forgiving, and he didn't give the other side a chance to breathe, his figure suddenly rushed into him. There are no fighting skills and no traces of training. Su Chen, who simply vented his personal anger, just hit the opponent with his unpretentious fists. Boom! At this moment, under the collision of the two, Hulk fell into a disadvantage again. His figure flew out, smashing the hyperactive buildings in the rear one after another. It's Hulk. My God, why does this monster appear here? The people in the city who had not been completely evacuated suddenly panicked. Compared with the extreme mutants who just succeeded in the nuclear explosion, people are more panicked about the Hulk raging in the city. After all, Su Chen looks like a teenager no matter what. But Hulk is tall and sturdy, as tall as a small hill, and out of control. He often vents his anger to cities around the world. This is simply a demon. Ironically, this Hulk is now on their side. Banner wanted to return to a normal life on Earth. He thought he could manage Hulk's emotions. But under Su Chen's relentless punch, Hulk's face was completely ashamed, and the irresistible anger instantly tore through the prison of reason. Kill him. I want to kill him. Banner's painstaking practice of meditation skills suddenly broke, and his own master character could no longer control Hulk. Roar! Hulk, who became angry with anger, grew taller and his muscles became more knotted. Boom! His feet squatted slightly in the ruins, and under the terrifying jump force, his figure suddenly leapt towards Su Chen in the air. Boom! Su Chen continued to collide head-on with his body without a trace of fear. This time, the unparalleled physique he had tempered and retreated suddenly more than 10 meters. Very good. Su Chen smiled without anger. Body strength plus 50. Physical strength plus 50. The constructed system is very good at presenting the infinitely evolving genetic information instantaneously. He didn't know much about Hulk's principle of becoming stronger, and the stimulating effect of very high and deep gamma rays on cells. But Su Chen knows that if the opponent can continue to grow stronger, then he will definitely welcome it with his hands. Let alone the other party's ability to stimulate his body to become stronger. It would be great to have such a sandbag for venting anger, a sandbag that is not so easy to break. Let me see which string is missing in your head that makes you stand on the opposite side of mine. Su Chen thought he had become a supervillain, but Hulk, who was already a heinous crime, actually shot himself. Well, since the world is going to be an enemy of himself, who dares to stand on the opposite side of himself, he doesn't mind sending him into the earth. Roar! Successfully smashed his rival Su Chen, Hulk thumped his chest with both arms excitedly. It's just that his punch just now didn't cause any substantial damage to the enemy. If looking at the other party with interest, without a trace of fear on his face, Hulk only felt that this was the enemy's provocation against him. Ever since, he didn't hesitate at all. The unusually developed muscles of the bottom plate suddenly exploded with terrifying power in an instant. Hulk repeated his old trick, relying on his incomparable jumping ability, leaping into the air, and the entire Warhammer-like thick arm smashed the figure on the ground fiercely. Take it to death, he roared, and the blood boiled at this moment. The body that smashed in was even more engulfed with immense power, as if a mountain tumbling over. The heavy shadow immediately enveloped Su Chen's figure completely, and the suffocating aura condensed in the surroundings. Good job. Su Chen became more and more courageous as he fought. Boom. His feet stared at the ground, and the ground broke directly. The tip of the needle is to the maiming. Facing the rushing figure, he jumped directly, just like that head-on. Boom. Su Chen's clenched fist hit Hulk's body like this. It stands to reason that the physical gap between the two people is so huge. One is as strong as a small hill, while the other is of a normal 13-year-old physique. But it's just such a huge gap. The result of another head-on was that Hulk was knocked out. Boom. His body flew out like a cannonball. Under the impact of this terrifying fist power, Hulk's body actually smashed more than a dozen buildings in succession before officially releasing this power. Roar. Hulk, full of dizziness, stood out of a ruined building very slowly. This time he failed to condense the fighting spirit, and his trembling body seemed to fall down completely in the next second. Puff. He couldn't stand his body firmly, and a stream of blood spurted out of his mouth. The sharp pain from his waist made his right hand touch it, and the whole palm was overflowing with blood. Anger. The boundless anger burned in his mind like a flame. The more angry the mood, the more active the gamma rays of the cells in the body, and in the blink of an eye, Hulk's injuries healed quickly at a speed that everyone can see. Not only that, but his strength and aura climbed layer by layer, and his physique rose up all at once. The scar is forgotten to hurt. Hulk, who felt he had done it again, was immediately full of fighting spirit. But in an instant, his innate fighting intuition had a hint of caution in his mind. Hulk's eyes widened, and suddenly he found a figure flying by his side. The speed is so fast that he can't even react immediately. Boom. Su Chen's attack fell on him again. Hulk's figure only retreated a few meters this time, and he had completely stabilized his figure. His green face full of flesh was already distorted. It seems that he doesn't understand why the opponent's power can continue to suppress himself. Su Chen didn't say much, his fists quickly bombarded the monster in front of him like raindrops. I want to see where your evolutionary limit is. This is the first time Su Chen has encountered an enemy who can become stronger in the war. Under his strong curiosity, his fighting spirit was extremely high. Different from the previous battles with abilities, the frontal hard blows from fists to the flesh made his blood boil even more, and the whole person's energy was extremely concentrated, and the feedback touch brought by the bombardment was enough to make people feel extremely comfortable. Su Chen finally understood why boxing matches are so popular all over the world. Boom! Su Chen at this moment is like an untiring combat robot, relying on his own speed advantage. Constantly punching the Hulk in front of him. Physical strength plus 10. Body strength plus 50. The infinitely evolving mutant gene makes it even more so that after every punch, it will usher in a sudden increase in strength. When he was so excited, Su Chen even forgot what avoidance was. In such a way of changing wounds for wounds and lives for life, he continued to fight desperately with the Hulk in front of him. Soon, the frequency of contact between the two is increasing. Hulk was completely blinded by his beating. After only half a minute, he retreated more and more, and the fighting spirit in his heart was like a pot of cold water. Since the birth of his personality, in the memory, there is no one who is not afraid of him in this world. After all, the more angry he gets, the stronger he is, and he is not afraid of anyone at all. But now, the young man in front of him relied on his immortal physique, relied on his infinitely evolving mutant gene, and looked at his body strength that was constantly becoming stronger in the battle. The Hulk in front of him suddenly felt extremely strenuous. He only felt that he was fighting the enhanced version of himself. The injuries on his body are increasing. The muscles of both arms are more like lead, and it becomes more difficult to lift. The whole person's retreat step is more and more. The confusion in the heart further created the meaning of fear. Yes, at this moment, Hulk did feel an unprecedented level of fear. He was scared. Ever since, his injury is simply difficult to recover. The whole person couldn't even produce a trace of will to resist, so that he was completely beaten unilaterally by Su Chen. Coward! Su Chen smiled. Boom! With another punch, the Hulk in front of him fluttered tens of meters away. He fell heavily into the ruins. At this moment, he couldn't stand up, and his whole body was dripping with blood. No one thought that the Hulk in front of him would be so scared of being beaten by Su Chen before he met his old enemy Thanos. Compared to Hulk, who had completely lost his confidence, Su Chen completely transformed his body into success again in this battle. His instinct tells himself that even if it is not covered by the power of thought and the energy barrier, his body alone is enough to counter the power of a nuclear explosion, and being in it, there won't be too many wounds. I haven't waited for Su Chen to feel the physical changes in it. At this time, a huge willpower suddenly came. Enough, boy, see what the cities around you are like. The battle between you and Hulk is so fierce, everything around you is almost in ruins. At this time, a majestic willpower came. His words were very gentle and did not show a trace of hostility. I really regret that I didn't find you the first time and let them brew all the sins. Trust me, I know you are innocent. Su Chen frowned, because he couldn't tell where the sound came from for the first time. There was no clue, no trace, it was so abrupt, and it appeared in his mind so clearly. For a time, Su Chen was thoughtful, vigilant as he was facing an enemy. I am not an enemy. Just as the words fell, Su Chen's vision suddenly changed. The surrounding area was no longer the ruins of the city, but came to a palace hall full of classical colors. An elderly figure in a wheelchair appeared in his eyes. Professor Charles. Su Chen instantly recognized who this person was. He searched the story of General Stryker on his mobile phone, and most of the relevant entries were related to Professor Charles and Magneto King Eric. This is a mutant leader, known as the Master of the Soul, and it is said on the internet that his brain is the most valuable brain on the entire planet. As long as he has a thought, he can even link the spiritual world of all people around the world with the help of the brainwave intensifier. Most people live and die, even between his thoughts, under his moral judgment of good and evil. This fact is extremely creepy. It's just that Su Chen has no fear in the face of such an existence. He knew that at this time, he had been pulled into a spiritual world by the elderly Professor Charles in front of him. In this regard, he did not feel a trace of fear. Spiritual energy plus 100. Mind resistance plus. Mind barrier plus 100. The constructed system is presenting the genetic information of the mutation very clearly. The emergence of this spiritual master in front of him, on the contrary, made Su Chen's own spiritual energy and even resistance to the spiritual level more and more enhanced. You shouldn't find me this way, Su Chen said coldly. No, if I didn't fall ill recently, I would even stop what you did for the first time. Everything can be saved, my child. Professor Charles still looked like a good old man, and continued to speak heartily. So you came to stop me too? Su Chen laughed unconvincingly. Less than a second, the elegant and majestic hall around it suddenly began to tremble, as if it had suffered an earthquake. Professor Charles frowned, because he knew it was the opponent's spiritual energy resisting. This is a spiritual world, a spiritual palace, an illusion created by oneself. But now he began to resist. The marble floor covered with blankets suddenly cracked, the dust on the entire ceiling fell even more, and a piece of stone slab collapsed from above. Everything that holds here is beginning to become weak. Professor Charles opened his mouth wide and stared at the scene in disbelief. He knew that the other party didn't have the spiritual ability in this area at all before this. But now, the 13-year-old boy in front of him has begun to continuously raise his physique in his spiritual world. This is a very powerful manifestation of spiritual energy. So why can you stop me? Su Chen sneered. In such a world of spiritual power competition, all illusions can be realized, and the nature to rely on is one's own spiritual energy. Under the mental stimulation of Professor Charles, Su Chen, who further developed his evolution, not only consolidated his spiritual barrier, but also illuminated the use of spiritual energy in his mind. At this moment, his body turned into a heavenly giant. Suddenly it was like a stalwart god. His divine eyes looked down at the figure sitting in a wheelchair on the ground. Impossible. Professor Charles still felt weird at this moment. He couldn't understand at all. How could a mutant who survived a nuclear explosion through the absorption and release of energy suddenly be born with abilities about the type of mind? In the battle with Hulk, this guy with no trace of fighting training just relied on the strength given by the opponent to continuously grow his body and defeat his opponent. I didn't expect his abilities to cover so many fields. Oh my God. Professor Charles couldn't even express his shock in words. And he also basically has his own principle, that is, when others disagree, he will not casually probe other people's memories, so he is not even sure what the other party's ability has for a while. Of course, he didn't come here to fight. Looking at the great idol standing in the sky and earth in front of him, Professor Charles finally gave a wry smile. You brothers and sisters are really surprising. The moment the words just fell, Su Chen's huge hand covering the sky suddenly stopped the act of grasping the opponent. What did you say? Su Chen's mood became more and more unable to calm down. Under the violent mood swings, the surrounding spiritual world collapsed more and more rapidly, as if the entire illusion would be completely shattered in the next second. Professor Charles raised his right hand with ease, and everything that had collapsed around quickly stabilized. Your sister Susan has been in my college for a while. Not only that, when she saw you on TV, she deliberately prevented our X-Men from appearing for the first time, and even prevented other people from waking me up in order to prevent me from taking action. This indeed sounds very much in line with the style of his sister's little witch. The little witch with her sly gaze was very noisy in the past. You better not deceive me. After learning this news, Su Chen's mood could no longer calm down. In the next second, he recalled the address of Xavier Genius Academy that he had seen on his cell phone in the past. Without a trace of hesitation, under the violent mood swings, the terrifying power of interfering with reality took effect instantly, and his figure disappeared without a trace. Su Chen's brain has already been developed, and his intelligence has also been improved. The best manifestation is that all the things seen in the past, all the details, all the insignificant little traces, can be easily recalled now. To be honest, when searching for relevant information on his mobile phone, he really didn't care too much about the address of Xavier Genius Academy, his eyes were just a glimpse. As a result, one thought now recalls the relevant content with great ease. Under the mood swings, Su Chen is a good use to modify the power of reality. In the blink of an eye, his figure instantly disappeared in the ruins of the city, and even the giant figure in the spiritual world disappeared without a trace. Located in a small town in Yorkton, there is a magnificent manor house. This is the inheritance inherited by Professor Charles, and it is now the location of Xavier College of Genius. The boundless space rippled and fluctuated, just like this in the academy, and saw a thin figure wearing a black sweater just like this. My God, what's going on? No, the academy has been invaded. The students on the school aisle suddenly saw a strange figure that suddenly shuttled over. Even the school's detection device sensed a huge energy fluctuation and appeared in the manner. Wait, isn't this the guy? A sweater with a black hood and a pair of casual pants set off his slender figure very well. Under that sharp and handsome face was indifference, full of impersonal taste. Isn't such a familiar face just an extreme mutant who just appeared on global TV stations? Really handsome, many girls screamed. Wearing a black hood slightly covers Su Chen's black bangs, and there are 2 white headphone cables hanging around his neck. Such a demeanor is like a very popular cool kid character in the school, and it fits the handsome boy positioning that these girls dream of. Don't be nympho, hurry up and be on guard. No matter what, the boy who suddenly arrived in front of him has just refreshed the history that the mutants could not set in the past. Give me everything back. There was a sound of anger. I saw a tall man wearing tactical eyepieces walking directly towards Su Chen. Criminal, you dare to appear in front of us. If you are not brought to justice, that would be the biggest humiliation to our X-Men. It is because of your existence that humans from the outside world hate us mutants so much. The laser-eyed Scott who came suddenly said something like this. Nor does it mean to continue to say hello. He didn't even bother to greet each other. In an instant, the tactical eyepiece of the laser eye flashed a bright red light. This red light was magnified and instantly turned into a thick red beam of light, blasting towards Su Chen in front of him. Is it just this level? Su Chen said indifferently. He gently lifted his right hand forward, and the energy fluctuations that came out made waves of ripples. The beam of energy coming from the collision was like falling into a black hole, and the huge energy disappeared quickly. Laser Eye Scott also felt the radiant energy he condensed quickly fade away. He clenched his teeth, riveted enough strength, and burst out the power accumulated in his body. He didn't believe that the other party was really so tenacious, able to hold a beam of light that could penetrate most of the town. You must know that even Edmund Alloy can't hold on for long under the high-temperature laser light. He stepped forward. Don't waste your effort. Su Chen's eyes were filled with contempt. Although the laser light in front of him is very penetrating, Su Chen himself is very handy and adept at absorbing and releasing external energy. No matter how much energy the other party spews, his body after undergoing the baptism of a nuclear explosion is enough to absorb it. Of course, looking at the other person's eyes can release such a terrifying beam of energy, but it also brings some inspiration to Su Chen himself. Su Chen, who learns and uses lively, tries to condense the energy in his body between his eyes. Soon, his cold, black and white eyes showed a hint of golden luster. Laser beam. My God, isn't this the ability of Teacher Scott? At this moment, all the students clinging to the windowsill of the teaching building saw an unforgettable scene. Teacher Scott's opponent, his eyes burst out with a bright beam of energy. Boom! Su Chen first appeared in the world's hot sight, and just hit the opponent's laser beam. One golden, one red, 2 light beams of different colors collided with each other. But the balance between the two was maintained for only half a second, and the golden light released by Su Chen crushed the opponent's laser light. Boom! The golden light beam that hit him all the way, hit Laser Eye Scott's body mercilessly. Boom! In the blink of an eye, his figure was knocked out. Like a tattered sandbag, it smashed the pear wood door behind it, and the whole embarrassed figure fell to the ground. Ms. Scott lost. It's too miserable, and is it still defeated by the ability that the other party has learned? The students hiding behind the big windowsill suddenly started talking. No one thought that the elite X-Men's backbone, Laser Eye Scott, would lose under the beam of the opponent's eyes. The outbreak of the fighting between the two can be described as fleeting. The X-Men personnel who hurriedly found that their teammates had fallen to the ground. Beast, Storm Girl, Steel Warrior, Nightcrawler, and others all looked like they were facing an enemy. Elder brother. At this time, an untimely cheer came out from the mouth of a girl. Susan. Su Chen couldn't hold back the joy in his heart. Isn't the figure of the girl who ran up between the jumps just the sister who had been lost for many days? Whoosh! Like a bird throwing a swallow into the forest, the cheering Susan flew into Su Chen's embrace. Elder brother. Susan, who has always been naughty and strong, couldn't help letting a little cry in her words at this moment. I thought I couldn't see you. Susan's eyes contained tears, and a pair of small hands gripped Su Chen's clothes tightly, as if afraid that he would disappear in the next second. Counting the time Su Chen himself was in custody, the two have not seen each other for almost 20 days. Since the death of their mother, the two have basically lived a life of mutual dependence. Thinking of the pains of the past, even Su Chen, who has been indifferent for a long time, can't help but feel sigh. It's okay, everything is over. Su Chen is much stronger than in the past. For more than half a month, his own training has not only been reflected in the evolution of the body, but even the whole person's mood has undergone a transformation. He is no longer as flustered and confused as in the past, but tried his best to comfort his sister. You should be okay. How are you doing during this time? Compared to himself, Su Chen cares more about how his sister is doing during this period of time. It's okay, the food here is pretty good, but it's much better than my brother's craftsmanship. Susan's words made Su Chen a little ashamed. Ahem. At this time, Professor Charles, who came in a wheelchair, interrupted their greetings. This old grandfather came to me. He is very powerful, but I was crying and begging him at the time, but I couldn't find you. Susan frowned and said very dissatisfied. At this moment, her little hand gripped her brother's right hand tightly, and her arm trembled a little. Obviously she was a little nervous. Although Susan has always been eccentric and mischievous, compared to what her brother did on the TV station, those little jokes are nothing at all. No matter what the future is, no matter what she will face next, she is also very determined to stand by her brother. Everyone, go back to their dormitory. Professor Charles waved his hand to signal everyone to stop watching. This is too disappointing. I don't want to fight. Everyone seemed a little excited. After all, mutants are marginal figures in society. When they think that they have superpowers, they suffer from discrimination and injustice from outside humans. Naturally, many mutant children are very dissatisfied. Everyone is still young, blindly giving in to humans and bowing their heads to the outside world. It really makes them feel extremely discouraged and frustrated. Now, a teenager who is almost the same age as them is standing in front of everyone like this. He achieved an accomplishment that Magneto could not accomplish in the past. Fear, everyone can't help but look at Su Chen with a trace of admiration and admiration. Ah, Professor Charles can feel the changes in everyone's mood. In recent years, cases of injustice against mutants have indeed become more and more rampant, so that people's hearts are a little impetuous. Professor. The X-Men gathered around one after another, and their vigilant eyes looked at Su Chen not far away. Scott's right shoulder is completely penetrated. As long as he deviates more than 10 centimeters, I am afraid that his entire arm will be completely shattered by this guy. The Storm Girl said angrily. As the X-Men, and their partners for more than 10 years, most of the people present felt a bit empathetic, and they all felt the same hatred. Arrest him. Don't hesitate anymore, Professor. What he did is nothing more than a copy of Magneto, and his existence will only continue to sever the connection between the mutants and the human race. Hear the words. Susan became furious and said very dissatisfied, are you guys used to being enslaved? People are staring at you, and you still want to continue to reconcile with them. Did my brother be treated as a guinea pig by humans? Is the hunt for the blame? You don't even think that Susan is only in her early teens, but she is witty, and her rebuttal is very beautiful. Many X-Men were not afraid of Su Chen's existence, they would almost be unable to control their temper. This naughty little witch. Gangalashi felt a little angry when she thought that she had used her own ability to remove a wheel of the fighter plane in order to prevent herself and others from setting off. We have communicated before. Professor Charles ignored the noisy words around, but calmly said to Su Chen, all the sinful things that General Stryker did, the X-Men and I will deal with them personally, and give you justice. Do you think I need your help? The gentleness on Su Chen's face gradually disappeared. Professor Charles was speechless for a while, and he did achieve an accomplishment that many extreme mutants could not accomplish in the past. However, the size of this world is far beyond his imagination. At least this young man didn't know that he was not invincible, and there were more unimaginable existences in this world. No, you need to clean up the dirty spots on your body, and you need to stand in front of everyone in the world to eliminate the panic that you have caused. You are only 13 years old. You should go to school and enjoy your campus life instead of becoming a wanted man from around the world as running around. Professor Charles tried to redeem his determination. Do you think I would care? Su Chen's face is still cold. For so many days, he has thoroughly comprehended the law of the weak and the strong. He is better than others, so he doesn't need to care about any rules. No need for mercy or sympathy from others. It wasn't him who was wrong, and he didn't need any salvation at all. If his mind is not equal, then use his fist to pacify everything. As for the shackles that humans put on him, he would even break it himself. I will always believe in you. Susan's hands gripped Su Chen's arms so tightly. At this time, only the affirmation of relatives can bring a touch of warmth to Su Chen. So you still decided to stop in front of me. If it weren't for the sake of saving Susan, I wouldn't have so much thought to tell you more. Su Chen has issued the final notice. He didn't have the mind to continue to endure the painstaking words of these guys, but these were just in line with Iron Man Tony's argument. The words are not speculative. At this moment, even the gentleness on Professor X's face has gradually disappeared. Boy, you are too self-centered. At this moment a tall and graceful red-haired woman came over. I know the pain in your heart. I have lost control of my emotions many times and almost completely destroyed the earth, so your ability is nothing to me. Admit it. Of course, you can rest assured that I will act as your guardian and will never let you have today's problem again. Phoenix Girl Chin Gray said so confidently. At this moment, this tall and beautiful woman revealed her strong will and determination to control Su Chen. Guardian. A beautiful woman in her 20s suddenly came up and said that she wanted to be her guardian, which made Su Chen feel extremely absurd. But in the next second, the woman with red hair reaching her waist made no secret of the fluctuation of her ability. This woman. Su Chen frowned slightly, and the awakened fighting instinct also told him clearly that this woman was really dangerous. Trust me, I have the ability to guard you, and naturally have the ability to control everything about you. In the face of this unruly, still indifferent child, the dignified and majestic Chingere has added a hint of threat in his words. The professor is right, you are too young, your life has a broader future, and everything can be done from scratch. So is my brother really going to jail? Susan couldn't help standing up and asking. Yes, you have to pay a price if you do something wrong. This is the order of this world. What's more, I have been working to add a bridge of communication between the two races of humans and mutants. Now because of your appearance, the human panic about mutants will increase again. Professor Charles in the wheelchair changed his gentle expression and looked at Su Chen very seriously. Because of your appearance, our X-Men's efforts over the past few decades will even be meaningless. A terrorist-class mutant who succeeded in a nuclear explosion in the mainland. A wanted criminal who committed heinous crimes than the Magneto King Eric. It is conceivable how much human beings hate the mutant race. In order to repair the rift between the two races, the X-Men did not know how much effort and how many humans were saved before dismissing the discriminatory impression of mutants. Now the appearance of Su Chen has brought them a big problem. Professor Charles, who has always been peaceful, couldn't help being a little angry at this moment. There are not many years left in his life. He just wants to complete the peace between the two races as much as possible in his later years, so he will never allow others to destroy the situation in front of him. But my brother is clearly a victim. Susan's pupils burst with tears, as she faced others using racial justice to put pressure on her. Facing other people standing on the moral high ground and accusing her brother, she really felt uncomfortable, and she felt the same. Susan couldn't help but want these mutants to accuse her. Unfortunately, no matter what your original intention is, what persecution you have suffered, but when you do something wrong, you have to pay a price, just like your brother's heavy hand against Scott, he also has to pay a price. Storm Girl added coldly on the side. For a time, the atmosphere on the scene suddenly became a bit condensed, and the inexplicable killing intent was permeated around. In such an atmosphere, even the air velocity has become somewhat stagnant. The students behind the windowsill in the teaching building have long since disappeared. In this vast playground, only one X-Men dressed in uniforms gradually closed to the surroundings. Facing the opponent's unconcealed will to fight, Susan couldn't bear the words just standing on the moral high ground. She looked at the people in front of her, wiped away the tears in her eyes, and snarled very angrily, "It is because of you people who are constantly patients that my brother was arrested wantonly. If it weren't for you, my brother and I wouldn't be hiding everywhere at the time. I can see you through, brother, let's go." The wise Susan retorted very well. Sadly, she wanted to use her weak spatial transmission ability to leave the scene directly. What? Only in the next second, Susan frowned and called out in pain. It was Phoenix female Chin Gray who made the shot directly. Her invisible thought fluctuations directly contained Susan's thoughts. "You dare to move her." Su Chen suddenly got up, and his sister was basically where he was. In an instant, his mind was like an erupting volcano ready to go, and terrifying and boundless thought power fluctuations were about to brew. Don't think about it. But at this time, Professor Charles, the master of the soul, also followed suit. In the previous encounter between the two, although he was surprised that the other party was able to resist in his own spiritual world, he did not feel much fear. After all, Professor Charles himself has always abided by the creed of not using too much spiritual energy unless necessary. Because he doesn't want to invade the privacy of others. Now, facing such a mutant with at least an Omega level, he can only unscrupulously release his omnipotence. What? For a time, Su Chen only felt that his spiritual realm was hit by a shocking wave. Compared with Professor Charles, the soul catcher I encountered before is simply a difference. The mental barrier constructed in Su Chen's mind was completely broken at this moment. Boundless pains emerged violently. This psychic power even wants to snatch the control of its own body. Beast. Su Chen was very angry. His roar kept roaring in his spiritual realm. At this moment, his infinitely evolving mutant gene began to constantly evolve into restraint ability under the stimulation of strong psychological ability. Mind energy plus 1000. Mind barrier plus 1000. Mental resistance plus 800. Awakening. Mind energy absorption. The constructed system continuously shows the changes of gene information. Even Professor Charles didn't understand what kind of monster he was facing. Maybe he will add a definition to this teenager's physique after the fact. That is the Super Darwin's physique. Perhaps everyone has heard of Darwin's theory of evolution. After tens of millions of years of natural evolution, the ancestors of bird animals have evolved a pair of wings. As a result, they finally escaped from natural enemies on the ground and successfully obtained more resources in the vast sky. And Su Chen's gene that is changing all the time, under external stimuli, it may take only half a second to complete a new transformation. Not good. Professor Charles suddenly panicked. He felt that the mental energy that he had invaded into the opponent's head was fading away. Not only that, but the opponent's spiritual realm has grown more and more resistant, and even the spiritual barrier that was destroyed just now rises up again in an instant, becoming more stable. Oh my God, what kind of monster is this? Professor Charles suddenly realized that he could no longer attack like this. Because this seems to be urging the other party to evolve a means of restraining oneself. But when Professor Charles wanted to get out of his body, Su Chen's spiritual realm suddenly swallowed up, swallowing bursts of spiritual energy. "Jin, I need your help," Professor Charles exclaimed. Professor Charles encountered an unprecedented predicament at this moment. He had no idea that Su Chen was able to absorb and release the energy, completely acting on his own spiritual energy. The psychic power he had invaded the opponent's mind just disappeared continuously. Ho! Chin Gare yelled angrily, and another huge willpower came to Su Chen's mind. Professor Charles got away. Not only that, the surrounding X-Men have also taken action. Storm Girl's figure gradually suspended in the sky, her pupils gradually widened, and the sky around her soon began to change. She called the wind to call the rain, letting thunder brewing in the dark clouds. The figure of Gangalishi quickly ran towards Su Chen's figure. To say the fastest, none belonged to the Quicksilver and Nightcrawler in the X-Men. Whoosh! The speed of Quicksilver is comparable to that of thunder. During his bullet time, the movement of all objects is inexplicably slowed down, as if he was in a stagnant field of time and space. A drop of water in the air just suspended in midair, slowly sliding down at an almost imperceptible landing speed. The Steel Lux, who was running not far away, was even more than 10 meters away. Under such a time flow rate, Quicksilver can be said to be the only master in this field. Boy, he sneered, just approaching Su Chen in front of him without a trace of fear. Quicksilver slammed his fist suddenly, and it landed on the opponent's back. As time accelerates, his strength will naturally increase. What? But when the punch fell, the slender figure in front of him was still tattooed, and there was no wave of vacillation at all. Oops. Only when I was about to win did I realize that the opponent's physique had experienced the baptism of a nuclear explosion. His face suddenly became a little embarrassed. However, with an idea, he realized that the opponent's body must also have weaknesses. Quicksilver showed a smirk, and he didn't believe that his hands suddenly inserted his eyes, and the other party was still safe. Just as his figure went around in front of Su Chen, a sense of vigilance suddenly rose in his mind. Quicksilver's scalp was numb, because he actually saw the other person's eyes are looking at him, and the entire eye movement has been staring at his figure. Not good. He actually reacted. The life and death instincts that have been tempered over the years have forced Quicksilver's body to move immediately. When his figure appeared hundreds of meters away, the realm of bullet time ended like this. Quicksilver returned without success and was startled in a cold sweat. After returning to normal time, the figure from the Nightcrawler space appeared on Su Chen's back. Whoosh! His thorny tail suddenly left a trail in the air, running through the back of Su Chen's neck in front of him. One after another, you guys don't bother. Su Chen sneered. He awakened a restrained countermeasure to the enemies who shuttled through the space. His gleaming eyes can see the warping, wrinkles, and even gaps in the spatial structure. It is undoubtedly an act of dying to daring to play in front of him. As if it was a god-level predictor, Su Chen had already turned around, grasping the precise timing, and grasping the sharp thorny tail that penetrated. Not good. The Nightcrawler was suddenly shocked, and he could not expect the other party to react so fast, as if he had completely foreseen his actions. Run. Anxious in his heart, he suddenly wanted to use his abilities. It's a pity that the force dragging on the tail completely grabbed his figure from the ripples of space. Die to me. Su Chen clenched his fist with his other hand, and slammed into the dark Nightcrawler in front of him. The surging power emerged in the fist, and under the sway, it directly tore the air, and a sonic boom sounded. Do not. There was a burst of exclamation all around. Boom. But at close range, the Nightcrawler couldn't hide, so he took Su Chen's punch head on, and with a bang, most of his fragile soul was directly exploded into a cloud of blood. The power of this punch is really too powerful. It is beyond everyone's imagination. In this way, the Nightcrawler completely lost half of his body in one punch, completely collapsed to the ground, and became unable to move. The figure of Gang Lux is like a train crashing at full speed. He is cast with alloy steel, muscular, and as strong as an iron tower. He is the X-Men's physical power output and even a flesh shield-like role. He roared, his red eyes staring at Su Chen so tightly, his whole body was so fit, holding a giant body and rushing towards Su Chen like this. Only you. In order to prevent his sister Susan from being affected, Su Chen took a few steps forward, holding his right hand in front of him. Boom. He just leaned on the support of one arm, and he stubbornly blocked the collision of the Steel Lux figure, but Su Chen's own figure did not even take a step back. Rage's Hulk is still subdued by him. What is the Steel Lux in front of me? Boom. At this time, the thunder that had long been brewing in the dark clouds on the horizon finally kept smashing and falling. Bright beams of thunder and lightning continued to fall from the air. Under the command of Storm Girl, they smashed into Su Chen's figure. In order to avoid affecting her, a terrifying storm and rain engulfed Su Chen's body. Ho! Phoenix female Qin Zhe was also angry at this time, and after the tragic death of Nightcrawler, she could not hold back the power in her heart. A terrifying force mixed with the power of the Phoenix just descended on Su Chen's head. Be sure to control him. Professor Charles in the wheelchair became furious. He felt a little misguided. He did underestimate his opponent. If he could put himself on his brainwave intensifier, he would definitely not become as passive as he is now. But no matter what, in order to control this murderous young man, he once again used his spiritual energy to make a desperate attempt to completely seize the control of the opponent's body. For a time, Su Chen, who was under the siege of the X-Men, hugged his sister Susan tightly. Under such power of heaven and earth, he was afraid that Susan would be affected. An invisible thought force fluctuation formed a barrier support. Yushin Zhou. But when the indiscriminate phoenix will come, Susan's complexion suddenly turned pale. Elder brother. In this situation, Su Chen finally couldn't contain the anger in his heart. When his emotional rage got out of control, he used the mysterious power of reality modification. Die. Under Su Chen's emotional rage, he directly used the power of rewriting reality. The mysterious and weird power began to interfere in reality. The attacks from the surrounding blessings disappeared in an instant. The flying storm girl was still calling the wind and calling the rain in the last second, in charge of the thunder, and the supreme thunder constantly slashed and beat the figures of Su Chen and Susan. But in the next second, she suddenly bleeds from her 7 orifices, her consciousness is suddenly dimmed, and the whole person's sanity is completely wiped out by an invisible wave. Ah! She screamed, and then crashed down from the air tens of meters high. Do not! The steel man roared. He opened his arms, but found that his steel cast arm was gradually liquefied, like molten steel. The cells of his body burned with inexplicable high temperature. In just a moment, a billowing white smoke evaporated from his body. I don't want to die. Gangulashi stretched his right hand forward, but his right arm completely turned into a puddle of molten iron and splashed on the ground, and the terrifying temperature even pierced the surface of the ground. For a time, his entire body melted completely, and his proud and unbreakable physique was completely transformed into a pool of molten steel. Children. Professor Charles's complexion changed drastically. This moment, he looked at Su Chen's eyes as if he were looking at a demon. Under his wide red pupils, he felt his body becoming weaker and weaker. The eyelids are slowly closing. The whole person's sanity is getting more and more unclear. The memory is even more chaotic. He wanted to mention his mentality, but found that he couldn't lift a finger, and even the consciousness in his head became more and more depressed, and he couldn't even remember who he was. The deadline has come. Professor Charles suddenly realized that his consciousness was completely apathetic, but under a terrifying reality intervention, he first caused Alzheimer's disease and then gradually became debilitated into brain death. The most valuable head in the world ushered in his ending. As the main attacker, the Phoenix female Piano Gare was not weaker than the others at this time. Compared with other people, her tenacious vitality attracted more and more real forces to interfere. You don't have to be like this. The Phoenix girl's delicate and dignified face was filled with a hint of fear, but she looked at Su Chen in front of her with complex meanings. The cold, ruthless, murderous face was like a reflection of her youth. But he has already stepped out. Why is the other party still persistent? Things shouldn't develop into such a bad manner. Do not. You never stepped out. It was Professor Charles. That old man completely sealed all your negative emotions. A voice rang in Qin Zhe-Lei's mind. In the depths of her mind, the boundless smoke was permeated, and she was immersed in boundless darkness, and there was a figure of a lady who was imprisoned. That is herself. That is another personality of Qin Gare. Compared with the dignified Qin Zhe-Lei itself, the identical figure in the prison was full of charm. Black Phoenix. Professor Charles was very terrible when he was aware of the ability of the other party to lose control and change when he was young. It was a terrifying force capable of subverting the planet and even endangering the universe. For this reason, in order for Qin Gare to control herself and become a good person harmless to the world, Professor Charles kept all her negative emotions and even bad memories of the past in a prison in the spiritual realm, middle. Su Chen's interference in the reality of the force suddenly destroyed the prison like a dawn. The fragments of memory were awakened in Qin Zhe-Lei's mind. I killed my parents. Qin Gare suddenly recalled the worst scene. Because of her own temperament, she suddenly caused a car accident in a car driven by her parents, causing both parents to die. I once killed many innocent mutant students when I was 17. At the age of 19, I almost lost control and completely evaporated the lake in the college. One by one, the memory fragments of Professor Charles in the past emerged in this way. This is the real self. Black Phoenix's voice became clearer and clearer. Qin Gare's hands tightly covered her head, and in an instant, a surge of murderous intent surged out of her body, a force capable of disintegrating everything, even the air molecules began to annihilate. Stand up. Soon, from her body, an invisible storm of annihilation burst out of her body. The earth began to decompose. Even the buildings of the manor in front of them began to collapse into patches of gray mist. Everything has returned to the simplest molecules and atoms. No, stop it, Chin Gare roared. The changes in the current situation are simply beyond everyone's expectations. What is this again? Su Chen's complexion changed. His mind power barrier shattered instantly under the beating of this wind. He felt the power fluctuations in it with his right hand, but within a few seconds, he found that his body that had been tempered many times had wounds again. Puff! Drops of blood continued to fall off from the wound, but they were drawn by an invisible stand, as if retracing time. A drop of blood returned to his wound and quickly recovered. His immortal physique naturally played a role at this time. Su Chen frowned. This suddenly split personality seemed to become completely out of control under her own stimulation. Compared with the decomposing master before, the power of this phoenix girl is really crushing the opponent. Elder brother, Susan screamed. Her hands clasped Su Chen's arms tightly. Under the out-of-control power of the phoenix girl, not only the surrounding air began to decompose, but the thoughts of every creature around him began to suffer mentally. Of pain. Susan's face was pale, her entire face completely lost its blood, and she was obviously affected. Let's go. Su Chen glanced at the magnificent manor and began to disintegrate. A mutant student screamed in horror and continued to flee. The power of space caused ripples, and Su Chen no longer cared about the life and death of these people, and left this place of right and wrong directly with Susan in pain. Chapter 31. A red car drove on the highway, constantly heading in the direction of the first city. The super slaughter girl's small and exquisite figure almost stood in the driving position and started racing. Along the way, I don't know how much dissatisfaction aroused. For the super killer Mindy, everything that happened today is too horrified and can be called a nightmare. The death of the father's father. And even Su Chen, the friend I just made, actually did such a shocking thing in the first city under rage. The thought of what he said when he was angry, I'm afraid it hurts his heart. I feel a little embarrassed about the super killing girl. In any case, she must find each other. Unfortunately, the communication message in the first city in front conveyed that the other party's figure had long since disappeared after lying on Hulk. This made the super killer Mindy a little at a loss. The red car was so confused by the wandering on the road. And at this moment, just when she was at a loss, on the road ahead, two figures suddenly appeared out of thin air from the ripples of space. Oh my god. The super killer was so silly that she hurriedly turned the steering wheel to the side, and the entire red car crashed into the side tree stump. Just as she cursed, her completely awakened head immediately reacted. Isn't one of the figures wearing a black sweater the same as Su Chen? This day, it is too extraordinary for most people. No one thought that a nuclear explosion resounded in the first city, and the magnificent building, dome, that had not yet been put into use would collapse like this. The most embarrassing thing was that the military representative had just announced that the young mutant was a most wanted man in the world. As a result, before the press conference was held, the military representative was buried under the opponent's hands. A 13-year-old boy named Su Chen resounded all over the world on this day. He has achieved an achievement that extreme mutants could not achieve in the past. Magneto King Eric can only bow down to the wind. Many mutants regard it as an idol. It's even more called Mutant One. Single quote. Certainly, not many people knew what they regarded as a mutant idol and also attacked Xavier College of Genius on that day. Including Professor X, many X-Men were killed on the spot. What is even more frightening is that the Phoenix female Piano Glay completely lost control, and another personality, the Black Phoenix, began to snatch the control of the body from the master. The entire magnificent Villa Manor collapsed more than half, and the mutant students fled in haste. More than 10 minutes after the incident, the wave that was enough to decompose everything disappeared, and the figure of the Black Phoenix also disappeared. No one knows where the existence that claims to be capable of subverting the earth has gone. Perhaps hiding in the dark, continue to fight for the right to control the body. The SHIELELD agents who heard the news were all disillusioned. It is immediately listed as a Level 9 authority event, and non-Level 9 agents cannot access relevant information. As far as Director Nick Fury was concerned, he knew exactly how terrifying power the Phoenix Girl concealed. Even in his heart, if that woman really loses control, I am afraid that even the newly promoted #1 mutant Su Chen will not be able to compete. It's really eventful. Now, The Avengers Project will be launched immediately. In the original historical plot trajectory, the Avengers, which was originally established to face the increasingly severe alien threat, were launched ahead of schedule at this moment. The absorption and release of energy. This is his key ability to succeed in a nuclear explosion. Seeing through the movement of things and the trajectory of space, such a name seems inaccurate. But it is his key ability to predict teleport killers. Indestructible physique. Block the mental resistance of the mind catcher. Sonic resistance. And even, that mysterious and infinite is enough to determine life and death in one word. In the Stark headquarters company, Tony Stark's figure appeared. His upper body was wrapped with a layer of gauze. If it were not for the airflow from the armor at the end, he might be immersed in the sea and swallowed completely. In the face of Su Chen he met before, Tony still tried to find a way he could contend. But in the end, he felt extremely prostration. The opponent is too strong. If the inference of artificial intelligence Jarvis is really correct, then this teenager's genes must be extraordinary. It can only be announced. Tony sighed secretly, but he was about to completely disclose the hacker information obtained through hacking methods to the public. Today, he can only hope that the 13-year-old boy can change his mind and stop blinding his eyes, and walk the road to death. It is hoped that through the public's condemnation of General Ross, the killing intent in his heart can be alleviated. But it was first boarded by someone swiftly. Just as Jarvis was preparing to release the secret file globally, a young Chinese hacker girl from the world's top hacker organization, the Rising Tide organization, and the future Shockwave woman Daisy John, directly published the file completely. He was forced into this step by the evil men of the military. This is the persecution of mutants. General Ross deserves to die. Daisy condemned on the internet. Wow, once the news was put on the internet, it immediately caused a huge sensation. One stone set off 1,000 layers of waves. What made a 13-year-old boy into a demon? Many people gradually reversed their impressions and began to condemn. He is speaking for the mutants, he is the hero of the mutants. Just when people are fighting for Su Chen, another exact news spread on the internet. Su Chen, the #1 mutant, killed Professor Charles, and several X-Men died in battle. The news came out. Reverse again. Haha, what about a good voice for mutants? What about a good hero? It turns out that your mutant hero will completely kill the leader of the mutant moderate. To me, he is a hopeless extreme mutant. Let him die. Whether Su Chen is a mutant hero or a demon, for a while, it has aroused many heated discussions. After being immersed for a full week, unexpectedly, Su Chen's figure disappeared from public view. Yorkton City, Manhattan City. In the dark night, a magnificent Fisker mansion just rose from the ground, straight into the sky, as if it had torn the night. This is the gangster empire created by the ruler Wilson Fisk, who is also the famous Golden Union. It appears that Fisker Building Group is a magnificent commercial kingdom, but in essence, the underworld emperor Jin has dominated everything in the underground world, and his words can even reach his world without any decree. There is what he said. Thousands of gangsters were like loyal slaves working for him. Under such a splendid building, there are so many innocent bones buried, and among them, there is a corpse of the mother of the super-killing female Mindy. Hey, little girl, this is not where you can come. The super-killer Mindy turned a deaf ear. With her small figure, she ignored the warnings of the bodyguards and walked into the first-floor lobby of the Fisker building with a suitcase in the dark. Jingle. The alarm sounded suddenly, and the metal detection device at the gate directly detected a large amount of heavy metal materials. Little girl. The two mobs in black suits at the door felt bad, and immediately picked up a pistol worn on the side of their waist and opened the insurance directly, but they hadn't waited for him to pull the trigger. With a bang, Mindy reflexed with 2 shots, with precise bullets directly through their heads. Everything should be an end. Call. The super killer took a deep breath, and immediately unscrewed 2 fully automatic rifles from her suitcase. Da-da. The muzzle of the rifle burst into bright fireworks, and the fully automatic rifle continuously fired bullets, killing all the gangsters in the hall. Soon, outside the lobby of the Fisker building, Su Chen, wearing a black sweater, walked in with his sister Susan. Without a hint, or even a trace of fluctuation. A metal gate of the Fisk mansion closed so quickly. The reason has disappeared for a week. It is because Susan's languid spirit has been recuperating for a full week, and Su Chen is watching day and night, so naturally he will not leave. And now, the reason why he came to this Fisker mansion was that Su Chen, who was slightly indebted in his heart, decided to fulfill the wish of the Big Dad Daemon. Although he had never met and had no emotion at all, the other party died because of himself. Su Chen naturally wouldn't let him die so wrong. In order to deal with the enemy underworld Emperor Jin Bin, who was looking forward to it day and night, the Big Daddy Daemon trained his daughter Mindy into a killing machine. However, when you can get revenge, with the strength of the Golden Union, it is like a giant mountain that is basically difficult to shake. Now, Su Chen completely destroyed this huge mountain. A wave of thought power surges out of the mind like this, and in the plasticized state, one after another turned into a sharp blade with a light trace and penetrated the bodies of the gang members. In the blink of an eye, the figure in the entire hall fell to the ground quickly like mowing grass. These suit thugs and gangster bodyguards are simply not enough to be Su Chen's opponents. At this moment, the lights of the entire building went out completely. Everything around was plunged into the invisible darkness. Be careful, Jin has a mysterious assassination unit called Shuheihui. These ninjas have a very terrible assassination method. Mindy tensed his expression and became very alert. Susan cut directly into the state of molecular mimicry, which allows all damage and touch to pass through her body, unable to cause damage to it. Su Chen's complexion was still calm, and a pair of eyes swept across the surrounding environment with such interest. His clear black and white eyes seemed to flicker with dim light, and the rapidly evolving infrared vision and even night vision capabilities completely understood everything here. Whoosh! At this moment, a ninja in red who was hiding on the ceiling, holding his breath for half a minute, suddenly leapt and fell. The katana in his hand was glowing with cold light, tearing through the night, just like this, slashing at Su Chen's head in the air with a slashing posture. That's it. A hint of mockery appeared on Su Chen's face. Less than a second, an unknown mysterious force completely intervened in reality, and the face of the figure slashing in the air before his eyes changed, and the whole person's body began to collapse, turning into a bunch of bubbles, floating in the air. Another ninja in red couldn't hold it back. He broke his breath-holding effort from under the corner of the dark night. The experienced ninja quickly drew his sword from the scabbard in his waist, and the fiery light of the sword had not had time to flash in the air. The figure he threw in front of him seemed to have lost his whole body bones, and suddenly fell to the ground. With a thump, the whole person actually fell into a pile of donuts, spreading all over the ground. This, not to mention other secret killers, even Mingdi looked surprised and couldn't believe this amazing scene. Hiss! At this moment, many ninjas lurking in the lobby on the first floor were unable to hold their breath, and their numb pupils were filled with fear at this time. Such an enemy is really terrible. How did he do it? In such an environment full of killing intent and panic. Only Susan's laughter rippled around. Brother wants donuts, right? Su Chen heard the words and just rubbed Susan's hair with his right hand. Less than a second, the weird and mysterious power once again acted in reality. The ninja who had all exposed their breath trails in the previous moment completely collapsed, and the body turned into glass beads on the ground, sprinkled on the ground, and pulsed in a dim hall. The sound. Dee-dee-da-da. The sound of the glass balls falling to the ground continued. Only a week later, Su Chen has become more comfortable with the use of modifying reality. Obviously, he has learned a lot of nutrition in the past battles. Today, he can even easily complete actions that subvert reality under calm thoughts. Ding! Under one of his thoughts, the lights of the building that had been cut off were resounding like this. In such a short time, there were not many people in the whole hall. Mindy, the super killer girl with red eyes, immediately pulled the trigger and shot all the remaining figures under the light accurately through the head. That guy must be on the top floor. Mindy gritted his teeth and said coldly. At this moment, inside the top office of the Fisker building, suddenly a sturdy figure like a giant bear was sitting on a sofa like this. His full-faced face was completely distorted at this moment, and the crutches in his hand were crunched by him. On the edge of the sofa, one of his men was beaten to blood, lying on the ground, unconscious. The reason for everything was just that the subordinate reported bad news, and Jin Wei under rage shot him to death so quickly. As a being who possesses the theoretical limit of human physique, Jin Bin's fist is enough to beat a tiger alive. The personnel who are just sparring are all world-class boxing champions and even elite special forces. But they can't survive 3 rounds under Jin Bin's hands. Jin He is still very dissatisfied with this. Because he knows the existence of superheroes in this world, they often have terrifying abilities, at least he is very envious of mutants' abilities. The sudden crisis in front of him also made him realize that it seemed difficult to settle with his own strength. The first batch of hands-on association members lost contact. The bullseye has gone to stop. The other party has already been killed. One after another, bad news kept coming. According to the surveillance screen, the enemy is a super killer woman. In addition, there is also the extreme mutant Su Chen who was wanted not long ago. This news sounded like a thunder in Jin Bin's ears. In the past, the super killing girl was nothing but an eye-catching little grasshopper that kept jumping up and down. But now, Su Chen, who came together, made him unable to remain calm at all. His strong life and death instinct kept beating with warning signs, as if the god of death was urging his life to its limit. After all, it was a monster that was safe from a nuclear explosion. Just prepare for the ceremony. Jin Bin's huge figure just stood up, his completely distorted face was full of madness. Riding the underground world does not know how many years before successfully squeezing into the upper class. Now the underworld empire state building is facing the risk of collapsing, Jin naturally refuses to catch it. No matter who you are, if you want to take everything from me, I can hold you at my worst. No one can keep you. Little shit boy, don't think you are the most special in this world. Boom. Along with Su Chen's punch, a figure in front of him smashed the wall in front of him like a cannonball. These gangsters of Jin Bin, and even the members of the Shuheihui could not resist Su Chen's move. Whoosh. The whistling sound of breaking through the air kept coming, and at this moment 3 darts were thrown very accurately at the vital points of Su Chen's body. This superb throwing skill is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, before getting close to Su Chen's physique, he was completely blocked by an invisible force of thought lingering a few meters away, as if he had been trapped in a quagmire. The 3 darts couldn't make a step further and just hovered in the air. He is the target eye, his nerves are very abnormal. Super Killer Mindy said very vigilantly. In the past, the #1 killer under the banner of Jin Bin can make Dad a headache. But now, in front of Su Chen, it was like a fish on a chopping board, letting him slaughter it. Not good. The complexion of the bullseye changed drastically, but no matter how he struggled, his body was driven by an invisible traction, and he floated directly in front of Su Chen. What? He screamed, his whole body just disintegrated, and under a terrifying reality interference, he turned into a lot of bubbles and dissipated into the air. Of course, only his unique spine structure was completely revealed in front of him. Spine bones cast from Edmund alloy. Su Chen stroked his chin. Just now, he had completely penetrated the extraordinary inside the target eye through his gleaming eyes. A product of the X-Weapon project again. Of course, the bullseye can be modified, but because another master surgeon related to it successfully implanted it. Under the extremely surging mental power plasticization, the sturdy Edmund alloy suddenly deformed like a cotton candy. In the blink of an eye, Su Chen succeeded in shaping a slender blade under the will of Su Chen. Next second, this flying sword completely broke through the air, shuttled between the corridors one after another, continuously running through the bodies of human figures. No one can stop Su Chen's footsteps. Soon, he took the super killer girl and Susan came to the top floor of the Fisk mansion. At this moment, an unusually evil and surging dark power spewed out from the pear-wood gate in front of him. Su Chen frowned. This sudden emergence of evil power actually made his heart feel a little uncomfortable. As if something was coveting him in secret, Su Chen felt something. For a moment, he directly raised his head and looked at the ceiling. His black and white eyes seemed to see through everything and looked completely at the outside of the building. In the night. At this time, under the boundless darkness of the night, boundless dark clouds gathered together, forming a weird black channel. At this moment, a black vertical pupil appeared in the void staring at Su Chen like this. In the next instant, a surging evil force suddenly turned into a beam of light and began to descend. At this moment, the ancient evil god, beast, believed in Shuheihui, the existence named Haikong, descended in the ceremony. However, what is surprising is that the will that came was originally the successor of the ritual, Jin Bin. However, it seemed that Su Chen could smell better. He even abandoned Jin Bin and directly descended to Su Chen's body. No, why did you abandon me? Jin roared unwillingly. And this time, as if the whispers from the devil lingered in Su Chen's ears. The injustice in this world is pouring over you, let go of your heart, and I will give you the power to destroy the world. The evil god Haikong has an existence named, Beast. In the Marvel event, Shadow Domain, it has completely appeared on the stage. The method of possessing and descending has controlled the daredevil to completely lay down a group of superheroes, and the terrible demonic energy has completely corroded the hearts of the surrounding people. Daredevil's TV even mentions the existence of Haikong itself. No matter how, Cthulhu Haikong is an existence in another alien dimension. Alien dimensions, parallel worlds, and small universes are a very common thing for the Marvel Universe. And now, Cthulhu Haikong completely descended from the sky in the ritual carried out by the hand-to-hand meeting. But, a change happened like this. The heretical god Haikong didn't choose to drill into Jin Bin's body. Instead, it flocked to Su Chen's body. This is the perfect boarding body. Young man, I feel the majestic anger and killing intent from you. The injustice in this world is pouring over you. Let go of your heart, and I will give you the power to destroy the world. The sky above the city. I saw the boundless dark clouds continue to gather, and in it, a large black vertical pupil stared at Su Chen's figure like this. In the blink of an eye, an extremely evil force kept coming. It was like an empowerment, constantly trying to flood Su Chen's head. Do not, Jin Bin in the office yelled angrily. His eyes widened. In addition to the anger on his face, he was also mixed with inconceivable meanings. After all, he never thought that the evil god Haikong would abandon himself and choose other people as the host of the boarding. How could that fellow, Hida, be able to get the favor of the evil god? Don't you guys do something? Jin was anxious. After all, if you want to open the dimensional tunnel, you have to take a big risk. I don't know how many resources are searched outside, and even oneself can become a container in the future. But now, the Haikong summoned by the members of the Hand Healing Association actually abandoned himself and turned to the young man who killed him. What the hell is this? Jin Bin rage is full. However, the red-clothed ninjas of these hands-on associations knelt to the ground one after another, kowtowing their heads very religiously. Because they felt the will of the evil god Haikong appear more clearly in the world. What? Something's wrong. At this time, the roar from the will of Haikong just roared. It's so wrong. He felt that the power of will that he had landed in the opponent's body was fading away, and the power of darkness continued to flow from his body. Impossible. How can you seize my power? Haikong's roar was almost like an incompetent rage. He didn't even know that Su Chen had completely awakened the use of energy since he fought the Soul Master Professor Charles and the Phoenix Girl, involving the spiritual level. In other words, even if it is the mind or the spirit, the will-like powers that try to flood Su Chen's head will be absorbed by him desperately. For a while, the will energy of the evil god Haikong turned into pure spiritual power and fed it back to Su Chen. There is such a good thing. Su Chen didn't expect to have such a big gift package as soon as he arrived. This is the power you gave me to smooth the world. Ridiculous. With such a little strength, I dare not stop barking in front of me. It's true that you felt the boundless anger and killing intent from me, but this time, I felt a scent of aggrieved and irritated anger from your body. Su Chen sneered. These words made the black sky will invade from the dimensionality. He came from outside the dimension, and he couldn't do it completely if he wanted to fully descend on the body, he could only slowly grow his own strength by staying in a container. Haikong angrily pulled his will from Su Chen's body desperately. In order to retaliate against the opponent, his will finally fell into Jin Bin's body. You finally came. Coming. I finally feel the power. In the office, Jin Bin laughed arrogantly. At this moment, he finally felt the endless dark power permeating his body. Compared with the physical strength that he had tempered over the past decades, it was nothing short of cloud and mud. This is power. At this moment, Jin only felt that he could knock down a hill. Can be the next second. Do not. His face became more and more hideous and distorted, and the evil god Haikong simply didn't bother to pay attention to this self-blaming Jin. After the will was completely poured into his mind, he completely occupied all of his consciousness. The poor underworld emperor is now reduced to a container of the evil god's will. Boy, I will let you die. Haikong's wisps of will controlled Jin Bin's body in this way, and suddenly rushed forward. Boom! Unexpectedly, Su Chen, who was outside the door, was the first to collide. His body that had experienced the baptism of a nuclear explosion, and even Hulk's promoted Wushuang body just smashed the pear blossom wood door, and merged the golden body with one end. Flew out. I heard you are an evil god. Su Chen walked step by step, his figure flying. Without waiting for the opponent to stand up from the ground, he grabbed the opponent's head directly, and slammed into the ground like this. Boom! The entire ground was completely shattered, revealing a huge pit. Jin Bin's posture is like a green onion inserted upside down, grabbing the ground with his head. God! This is God! There is such a weak god in this world! Su Chen laughed wantonly. He grabbed Jin Bin's arm and squeezed it up. With a strong arm, he directly slapped it on the ground on the other side. Su Chen, who was particularly incomprehensible, raised his arms again and waved his left and right sides up and down, relentlessly slapping the body of Jin Bin, who was boarding in the black sky, on the ground on both sides. Boom! The earth is broken. The wisp of will that came from Haikong felt like vomiting blood. When did he endure such humiliation? However, the pain that came back from his weak physique caused him to be tortured. At this moment, he was covered with blood and could hardly move. Such a weak god is ashamed to say that he wants to give me the power to smooth everything out. Su Chen's handsome face was slightly evil and awe-inspiring under the power of the evil god swallowed, and his long black hair lingered slightly in the air, and even the strange black energy surged around his body. I'm sorry for you, Su Chen sneered, and there was no room to speak to the other party. Looking at this golden body lying on the ground, his foot was printed in the other party's head like this. Click! The huge head shattered like this. Jin He was aggrieved and killed. The incarnation of the will of the evil god Haikong also fell. And this time, welcome to the new master. The ninja, who had been kneeling on the ground, shouted at Su Chen with a pious expression on his face. Welcome to the new lord. The devout members of the Hand Healing Association just fell to the ground, alleging allegiance to Su Chen. Su Chen is a little confused. Shu Heihui will be loyal to the strong. You defeated Jin and conquered the black sky. These people will follow you from then on. The super killer Mindy understands this very well. Seeing the hesitation on Su Chen's face, Mindy added, anyway, if you don't ask for it, these guys are invisible and they won't be an eyesore. And you need more power. Hear the words. Su Chen didn't say much, and seemed to have acquiesced. Everything is over. The super killer Mindy glanced at the blood-covered Jin Bin's body on the ground, and sighed inexplicably. Soon, they left the Fisk mansion. This week, Su Chen in the vortex of the storm has almost become a global public enemy. In order to take care of his ailing sister, he kept a low profile and completely disappeared from public view. It seems to many people that even the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents mostly think that the most wanted mutant must sneak into a remote place and hide. But no one would have thought that Su Chen and his sister would live in one of the most magnificent top-notch apartments in Manhattan. Yorkton, downtown Manhattan. Skyscrapers hundreds of meters high go straight into the sky, but on the top floor of this building are top-notch apartments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not long ago, Su Chen came to this city inexplicably out of control because his childhood dream was to have the most luxurious apartment in this prosperous city, drive the best luxury car, and put his own moved from the township among relatives. Now, he has easily fulfilled his childhood dream. The reason why she was able to stay here without a trace of trouble was that the super slaughter girl with extremely rich social experience directly moved into this magnificent and splendid high-rise apartment through a sum of black money. Coupled with the psychic system ability that Su Chen has derived, many building administrators, including the housekeeper, have been brainwashed, so there is no trouble that comes with it. Su Chen's figure stood in front of the French windows. At a height of hundreds of meters, he was able to see the neon city scenery under the night in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the flow of people was like ants. Inexplicably, a sense of trampling the entire city under one's feet came to mind. No wonder rich people like to build offices on the top floor of buildings. A bird's eye view, the whole city is all in the eyes, giving people the joy of being king. As this ambition, Su Chen felt a different taste from the bottom of his heart for a while. Brother, if Mom is still there, I will definitely be proud of you. Sister Susan walked over in a puff dress with a doll in her arms. Yes, Su Chen smiled and rubbed her hair. Under this habitual movement, he found that he had become a lot taller. In just a few days, it seemed that after the battle with Hulk, his 13-year-old body had risen quite a lot, perhaps more than 1.7 meters. Even the physique has become stronger, the lined muscles are not bloated, and even a slight pinch, I feel the extremely majestic strength in the palm of his hand. The body has changed. Su Chen found that even his thoughts have gradually become more stable. After so many things, the childlike stubborn temper and the childishness on his face have disappeared. After being always by Susan's side, he no longer had a cold face, and the painful heart for more than half a month was finally comforted. Su Chen laughed a lot more these days. Even the darkness in his heart and the melancholy killing intent were hidden in the body and no longer appeared. Sometimes, Su Chen, who was in a trance, even felt that after finishing the final revenge, should he choose to take his sister and leave here completely. But after doing so much, he also knew that the trajectory of life had gradually deviated from the calm. Can he still go back? Even if he let go of everything? No one else may agree. At this moment, the younger sister Susan seemed to think of something and said, "Brother, do you remember the ghost that scared my mother when I was a child?" Su Chen suddenly remembered a scene in which his mother had scared him when he was a child. In the single-family house in the township, a figure tried to break the window through the night. The mother, who was about to fall asleep, was startled and quickly filled the gun in the drawer with ammunition. But in the blink of an eye, the figure outside the window disappeared. At that time, my mother even chased out the door, but at a glance, the streets in the night were empty, as if the scene just now was an illusion. Maybe it's a ghost. Mother attributed everything to her own illusion. This is the specific thing Susan mentioned. Su Chen didn't care about it in retrospect. After all, his mother was not in good health at the time, and maybe she had a nightmare. And many more. Suddenly, Su Chen's gentle complexion became serious, leaving a drop of cold sweat on the edge of his forehead. Something's wrong. How did this memory come from? Su Chen's complexion changed drastically. In an instant, he seemed to vaguely perceive some fluctuations in reality, as if there were some changes in the timeline. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this feeling. He is very familiar. Because he is a master who is good at modifying reality, this kind of subtle fluctuations that interfere with reality will definitely not deceive him. What did someone do? Who the hell is it? Su Chen, who became suspicious, suddenly realized that from the level of the mind system, he seemed to perceive an inexplicable, embedded, memory in his mind. It is not right to say that it is embedded. If you don't look closely, you will find that this little memory is so seamless, there is no clue at all. Thinking of someone tampering with the changes in reality in the secret, how long Su Chen's calm heart repeated killing intent again. After all, the unknown person hiding in the secret actually caused the memory of himself and Susan to be misaligned. What did that guy do? Su Chen frowned, only feeling that the killing intent in his body could not be suppressed at all. At this moment, the infinitely evolving genes in his body have also begun to gradually change, and they have already begun to respond to this inexplicable change. The same night, some time before, some remote and unknowable place. In the past, the students of Xavier College of Genius were gathered in a barracks like this. Since the number 1 mutant Su Chen killed Professor Charles, causing the deaths of many X-Men, and even after the Phoenix female piano blade completely blackened and completely destroyed the entire manor, these poor students suddenly fought in the few remaining X-Wars. The police ran around under the leadership of the police. An extremely ironic fact is that after losing the asylum of Professor Charles, there are unidentified persons following their tracks in secret. This is ironic. I thought that the root cause of Su Chen's blackening was the arrest of General Stryker. The bottom of everyone's heart is somewhat unpleasant. It is necessary to know that their teacher will insist on maintaining peace and order with mankind in the end, dispelling the panic of human society about mutants, and vowing to arrest Su Chen thoroughly. But now, without Professor X, without the elite backbone of many X-Men, they are like a bunch of mice running around on the street, everyone shouting and beating. In less than a few days, some students left the team and directly chose to return to their families. And among them, there are very ugly words constantly appearing. Everything Professor Charles has been teaching is false. This is the world where the weak eat the strong. Without the guarantee of force, we are just a bunch of guinea pigs for human research and dissection. There are too many ugly words in the team. Among them, many students shouted to follow the words of the number 1 mutant Su Chen. Only he can lead us out of the world. The days of being secretly coveted by humans in the past, chasing and fleeing, have already made many mutant students unbearable. Had it not been for the brutal Wolverine Logan, after receiving the news, he had successfully reunited with them, and killed a lot of invading personnel, I am afraid that the number of the entire team would continue to drop a lot. In the camp, the only remaining X-Men have finalized a very bold plan. We want to change everything. Maybe our attitudes and perceptions of humans have changed a lot, but we need to change everything and save everything. We need Professor X, and we need to return to the X-Men. We want to save it all. Phantom Cat said with a crying face, clenching his fist and exhilaratingly. The generations of X-Men, Iceman, Phantom Cat, Ruksha Girl, Shockwave, Bishop and others, and even Quicksilver who escaped from the dead, Laser Eye who was seriously injured, Wolverine all gathered. It all depends on you. Phantom Cat asked Logan. After all, the only person in front of him who can withstand the travel of time and space without breaking his body or even bursting his brain is the Wolverine who can recover himself. I'm ready, just come on. Wolverine took a deep breath and lay flat on a stone platform. Call. The Phantom Cat took a deep breath, and then continued to remind, your actions in the past will cover all the original history, and other people can only remember the changed history. If you can successfully change history, then only you will remember what happened to Xavier College of Genius. Bring them back. Logan. At this moment, the Phantom Cat's hands were pressed to the sides of Wolverine's forehead, and an unusually shocking wave of time and space penetrated Logan's head. He wants to go back to the past, find Su Chen who was arrested, successfully rescue him, and kill all the soldiers like General Stryker who were chasing him. So after this, Su Chen would not be transferred to the large snowfield base for the second time, then lost control, ran away, and then completely blackened, nuclear exploded the first city, and then slaughtered all of their X-Men. Save him, let him return to a normal life, and all tragedies will not happen. Let him live the normal life that a 13-year-old boy should have. This is the plan to reverse the future led by the Phantom Cat. Reverse the future. It sounds incredible. In fact, in this Marvel world, time and space shuttles, dimensional advent, parallel universes, and quantum technology are all very normal methods. But, at this time, she was still young, and she was not too proficient in the time and space shuttle ability of the New Awakening, so even she was not sure that she would be able to send Logan to the exact time. Hurry up. For her, maintaining this ability also made her a little tired and weak, and she couldn't hold on for long. Under the power of time and space, Wolverine Logan successfully returned to the past. However, there was a problem at the point in time. The Phantom Cat really couldn't control it perfectly. Logan did not return to the days when Su Chen was arrested for more than a month. Instead, it went back more than a year ago. After realizing that there was something wrong at the time, Logan did not choose to fall asleep to wake him up. He was unwilling to endure the pain of traveling through time and space again. At this time, another wonderful plan emerged in his heart. 100 times, kill that Su Chen completely. Logan's pupils were inexplicably red, and Professor Charles was his good friend. He was completely killed by brain death, which really made him intolerable. Ever since, Logan, who had deviated from the time point, rushed to the small town of Moss on the west coast, preparing to go to Su Chen's family to kill him, completely stifling the threat of the future in the cradle. As long as he is killed, all future nightmares will also not happen. Logan, who had planned his mind, drove his motorcycle to this town in the dark. With a strong killing intent, he just came to the outside of a single-family house. Squeak. He pushed open the fence door and walked into the small courtyard. Logan didn't go through the main entrance, but broke into the residence through the side window. At this moment, Logan's eyes saw the figure of a lady in pajamas from the window. What? With a scream, the lady who was Mother Zhejiang quickly recovered her composure and began to find a gun in the drawer. Logan didn't say a word, he was ruthless in his heart, and he went straight away. But at this time, the phantom cat that maintains the shuttle of time and space is simply difficult to maintain. Her power is still too weak, so that the entire timeline has not yet been condensed and closed, and it has begun to collapse. The timeline collapsed. It means that the interference factors that have not had time to complete everything will be readjusted back. Logan's figure disappeared in front of Su Chen's mother. Ghost. Mother Su only felt a panic in her heart. Thinking of the two teenage children still in the house, to ensure safety, she awakened them, and then walked out the door with the gun in hand, trying to check the safety. Although the timeline was not closed, it did not complete the real interference with reality, but the aftermath of trying to interfere with the timeline echoed all around and projected into Sus mother's mind. The ghost story has been passed down since then. After Logan returned to his timeline, also aware of something wrong, Su Chen frowned when he noticed the aftermath of reality. This sense of insecurity made him feel the malice of the world more and more. Who on earth is targeting himself? It's almost. After Wolverine awoke from the stone platform, he said very rage suddenly. Almost. He was almost able to break into the opponent's house, completely kill the young Su Chen, reverse the future, and all timelines will be replaced. Sorry, my ability is still too weak. The Phantom Cat, which was difficult to maintain, and caused all the timelines to collapse, said apologetically. But she was also very curious and said, is the timing of my transmission correct? Did you see General Stryker who arrested Su Chen? Wolverine heard the words and pondered for a while. The timeline is naturally wrong. However, instead of rescuing Su Chen, he suddenly thought that slaughtering Su Chen, who had not been awakened, was a more venting way. Well, just keep that feeling. Logan's eyes became a little deep. He couldn't wait, and urged directly, how long will it take to open the space-time shuttle next time? It will take about 2 days. Phantom Cat smiled wryly. For this new ability of the Second Awakening, she could not use it handily. However, the X-Men Iceman in the camp came up with a more secure plan. If you remember correctly, a child from Xavier College had come to ask for help before. His ability is to increase the expression of the X gene, that is, to enhance our ability. We may need his help. Remember his address? Well, it's a bit of an impression. Quicksilver, this matter is up to you, get him back as soon as possible. At the same moment, inside a high-rise apartment in downtown Manhattan, Su Chen had already determined that someone was secretly trying to interfere with the timeline. Without thinking about it, the other party must have gone to his former township house, so that he had an impression of his mother and sister. He has a serious expression. Compared to facing a nuclear explosion and thousands of enemies, this invisible killer tampering with the timeline secretly is the most daunting. No matter what, this kind of behavior involving the undermining of oneself has undoubtedly formed a stimulus, and the infinitely evolved genes have begun to metamorphose. It's okay. On the other side, the super killer Mindy, who lives in the dapping floor, walked over. Su Chen shook his head. This kind of thing that involves the rewriting of reality and the change of the timeline will not be clear for a while. It's going to be a public trial of General Stryker's case for more than 2 days. What are you going to do? Because the Rising Tide organization publicly exposed a series of illegal activities such as trafficking, human experimentation, etc. secretly involved in General Stryker, and even brewed the fact that a 13-year-old child was completely blackened. Under pressure from the fishing boat, he was forced to appear in court to confront him. In order to quell the fishing boat, the entire case also needs to be heard in public. In the past few days, Mindy can actually see Su Chen's hesitation. After all, he is no longer alone. The gentleness shown by Susan for many days is almost like the image of a big brother next door, not at all like before. So indifferent and ruthless. Sometimes she was thinking that maybe it would be a good thing to completely disappear after the revenge. She can sometimes see a trace of confusion from Su Chen, and it seems that the uncertainty about the future, especially when a young sister is around, makes his thinking even more worrying. Anyway, the world is so big, is there still no place to stay? At this time, Su Chen also gave a ruthless answer. I will personally execute each other publicly on that day. In full view, even in the public eye to execute opponents. Mindy opened his mouth. As for the arrangement after revenge, she didn't ask more, because at this moment, she didn't know what happened, but she felt a suppressed killing intent from Su Chen. No matter what, I will always support you. A smile appeared on Mindy's flawless face. At this time, she raised the phone in her hand and said very excitedly, "Remember the girl from the High Tide organization? She didn't know how to contact me. You should be interested in a copy of the information on the base built by General Stryker, of. In the past few days, a girl from the High Tide organization has been secretly contacting Mindy directly." In shock at that time, Mindy even planned to change the number completely and leave the high-rise apartment where he lived. But, surprisingly, the other party actually expressed kindness and was willing to help Su Chen, the so-called #1 mutant. Fangirl, or is it a fan of mutants with top-notch hacking skills? Mindy was a little surprised. However, thinking that the other party's affiliated organizations have already disclosed to the public information that is extremely detrimental to the government, it should not be an enemy either. And now, the Chinese girl who had never met before completely sent another extremely important secret base information. Early the next morning, after eating breakfast, Su Chen walked through the space alone. In less than a second from his house, he came to a beautiful mountainous area. This is already at least hundreds of kilometers away. In order to avoid troubles and risks, Su Chen did not bring his sister Susan and Super Killer. Danger prediction. Single quote. He called this ability to warn in advance when a loved one is in danger for the first time, an ability involving the spiritual level, as danger prediction. And Su Chen didn't know that in a parallel universe, a guy named Superman also had this ability. This undoubtedly freed him from worrying that the enemy would truly threaten his sister. Really have. At this time, after more than 10 minutes of journey, Su Chen's figure has been placed on a mountain that is at least 1,000 meters high. His clear black and white eyes have seen traces of artificial excavation on the cliffs of Chongshan. A waterfall sprinkled down like a horse, and above the spring, a metal iron gate that was very hidden under the vines appeared so eye-catching. Very good. It really is Stryker's secret base. He was not brought here at that time, so even with his extraordinary memory ability, he could not be found. Now it's an accident, with the help of a hacker girl who got what she wanted. But at this moment, a weird wave of magical power rippled in the surrounding air like this. The blue sky, as well as the surrounding mountains, seemed to be covered with layers of mirrors, stacked on top of each other, like a dream. The rising mirror quickly disappeared, and it seemed that the dreamy scene just now was my own illusion. But Su Chen's keen perception had already told himself that everything around him had changed. "I've been looking for you for a long time, little devil in the body of the evil god." I saw a bright firepower spark outline an arc, and soon, a spatial channel appeared in front of him. "I've been looking for you for a long time, kid." A figure wearing a crimson robe just walked out. As the mage of Kamatage, the tall and sturdy Mordo is even more reminiscent of the name of the melee mage. In an instant, the magical power fluctuations in the surroundings became more and more dense, and I saw that a group of figures wearing the same robes opened the door of the space through the hanging ring they wore, shuttled to and appeared on the top of each mountain. Su Chen frowned. He was curious when he offended these people. Was it last night? Indeed so. In this Marvel world, there has always been a hidden guardian force defending the entire planet. That is the Magic Temple Kamatage. Its leader, Sorcerer Supreme, has always had the title of Guardian of the Earth. This Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One has survived for more than 700 years. The Manhattan mage stationed in the temple last night felt a wave of evil spirits from outside the dimensionality, and an incomparably evil and dark power was coming to tear through the dimensional boundary. For the first time, many people think that it is the old rival Domum trying to come. However, this strength was a lot weaker, and he gradually and clearly argued that it came from another evil god Heikong who had a much lower personality. Everyone is relieved. After all, Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One has shuttled out of the earth. Then, this strand of dark will that came from tearing apart the dimension even dissipated quickly, so that after the temple mage arrived, there was not much clue. However, early the next morning, Baron Mordu, the older disciple of Ancient One with more advanced spells, had personally led a small team to investigate. There is still a trace of dark evil spirit waves remaining on your body. Baron Mordor folded his arms, standing on the cliff of the opposite mountain range, looking arrogantly at the opposite Su Chen. Are you talking about the evil god from last night? Su Chen understood the other party's intention. But, he smiled, that evil god is very warm and gives me a lot of strength. The fall of the word caused quite a bit of criticism. Just because you want to devour the power of the evil god. What a boastful statement. It's the first time I've seen it so fresh and refined by the body of the evil god. The surrounding red-robed mages released light waves of magical power. They either stepped on the void or stepped on the nearby mountains and forests, watching Su Chen with a stern look. Overriding the void, even the mountains began to float up strangely like carpets, but the spatial structure of the entire world was changing. This is too unusual. It's too mysterious. Vaguely, even the sky was ups and downs slightly, and everything around it seemed to have begun to change. Under Kama-Taja's temple mage, even the method of folding the city can be easily achieved. This is the field of mirror space they created. From the very beginning, Su Chen was brought into this realm by them. It seemed that the surrounding scenery had not changed at all, but everything that happened here would not interfere with the real world. If ordinary people encounter such a thing, they will definitely be shocked. But Su Chen's eyes had long awakened the ability of space detection. He can clearly see the warping, folding, and crack marks of the spatial structure. The changes in the entire mirror space are also in his eyes. It seems that you guys won't let me go. Su Chen's indifferent face was filled with a deep chill. It was originally for revenge, but he didn't think that he would be intercepted out of thin air, which made him feel a little upset. Cthulhu's body, still thinking about leaving. You should care if your life can be saved. Baron Mordo sneered. He waved his hand. The surrounding magical fluctuations spread more and more in the world, and the attack from the temple mage completely broke out at this moment. Get up, accompanied by a roar not far away. Boom. The mountain range under Su Chen's feet suddenly rose from the flat ground. This mysterious method did not scare Su Chen's figure. Whoosh. His figure leapt, evading the huge impact from below. The fluctuation of thought power surged around his body, and the sleeves of a black sweater made a rustle under the gale of the valley. At this time, a heavy shadow covered the sunny day, gradually covering his body. Su Chen glanced at it, and suddenly a high mountain on his side folded up, and the felled mountain range collapsed towards his body. That's it, Su Chen sneered. The next moment, with the blessing of the surging thought power, his figure shot straight into the air like a cannonball, thus avoiding the collapsed mountains. Under the turbulent high winds, Su Chen's black hood was completely separated from his head, and a black bangs kept fluttering on his forehead. At this time, his instinctive battle instinct had already told him that he was standing in the air and was ready to usher in an attack. After all, flying so high in the sky has indeed become a living target. Whoosh! In an instant, the fierce winds turned into a sword formation. With such a terrifying edge, they slashed at Su Chen's body. Not fast enough. In the midst of talking and laughing, Su Chen, who was still at ease, disappeared completely under a group of surprised eyes. The other party is also a master of space shuttle, and his perception seems to be very keen. This should be the power of the evil god. That kid dared to refute it. Find him soon. The temple mages finally looked serious, and they realized that the other party's methods were a bit extraordinary, and it was only a ray of the evil god's will that had come. Distraction is not a good thing. At this moment, a voice resounded from behind a temple mage. His complexion changed, feeling the strong wind coming from behind, trying to backhand to block. Puff! The blood bloomed. His movements were still half a beat slow, and a slender blade that was plasticized by thought power penetrated his back waist, revealing a sharp sword light from in front of him. Su Chen dismissed the fluctuations in mind power. Puff! The mage figure in front of him just fell to his knees, and the blood instantly turned into a pool of blood on the ground. First, Su Chen sneered. He looked at the red-robed mage around him. At this time, the game of hunter and prey just changed the role. What the temple mages in front of them didn't even think was that this young man was so difficult to deal with. Under the siege, not only did he easily dodge a crowd of attacks, but also completely killed one of his companions with a backhand. Unforgivable. Cthulhu's will is not as weak as imagined. Let's go together. Under the roar of anger, the figure in front of him immediately began to attack. The surging magical power fluctuations continued to accumulate, and only saw the surrounding mountains turbulent again. A group of mountains actually gathered, and a group of figures wearing crimson-red robes took advantage of this force to kill. Since I came to die, I'm not welcome. Su Chen's eyes flickered, and he instantly caught a red-robed figure that shuttled through the gap in the space. Kang! He turned into an invisible sharp blade with a thin trace from an out-of-spirit thing, and slammed it to the rear. Puff! The blood bloomed. A red-robed mage who had just emerged from his body was penetrated through his head. The other side, the red-robed mage figure that drilled out of the trees even shuttled half of the figure out of the trees, and Su Chen slammed a punch on one side of the figure. With a bang, when this punch went down, not only was the magic mask on the opponent's surface completely shattered, but the entire body was completely exploded into a blood mist in the bombardment of this punch. This desperate physical blow is really unreasonable. Whoosh! While Su Chen dealt with the two, magic ropes were continuously projected from all directions, and the light flashed, making it difficult to capture the trajectory fluctuations. In the blink of an eye, the magic rope with a faint silver luster was tied to Su Chen's limbs. Watch me tie you up as a beast. Ho! Accompanied by a roar, it was Sorcerer Supreme's eldest disciple, Baron Mordo, who thoroughly demonstrated his magical power. At this moment, his figure turned out to be hundreds of figures unexpectedly, and every figure that was above the air released the magic rope and fastened it to Su Chen's forearms. Kama-Taj inherited the inheritance of white magic from the three demon gods of Weixin Emperor. He is inclined towards peace, but it does not have too many offensive spells like black magic. However, Baron Mordo has always been an addiction to exorcism, and his spells are strong, but he has learned a lot of secrets from Ancient One. The move in front of him is exactly the spell cast by Doctor Strange during the fight against Thanos in the movie. In a blink, Su Chen suddenly felt the fading of his body's power, and the majestic spirit and spirit were somewhat fading. He boosted his strength many times, but found that his body became more fatigued under the struggle, and the luster of the ropes bound around him became brighter. The weird magic rope in front of him does have some merits. Even his own abilities seem to be blocked. You know, it's amazing. Hundreds of avatars of Baron Mordor were above the air, with a hint of ridicule on their same cold face, just looking down at the young man on the ground. This high posture is ridiculous. Su Chen saw in his eyes, the chill in his eyes became colder. He hates people overlooking himself the most in his life. Magic resistance plus 100. Magic absorption plus 200. The immortal physique instantly started to evolve under external stimuli. Magic. Before that, Su Chen hadn't encountered it before. But now, just like online games, the zero-based body template suddenly began to point on the attribute point of magic resistance. For a time, are you leaving this to trick me? Looking at the hundreds of Mordu figures flying above the air, Su Chen sneered. Click. His whole body was shocked, and dozens of magic ropes broke at this moment. What? Baron Mordu's complexion changed slightly, but he wondered why the other party could raise his strength under this secret technique. Wrong. In the next second, his complexion became more embarrassed, but he found that his magic power began to flow away. Puff. Dao Dao's avatar was completely disintegrated without the maintenance of magic power. At this moment, Baron Mordor had already felt the magic power in his body as if it had opened a gate, completely venting it out, and rushing into the boy's body along the magic rope. What black magic is this? Baron Mordo looked furious. Who would have thought that it was a means of binding the opponent, but it actually made oneself restrained. Magic absorption. After being eroded by magic, Su Chen's unparalleled physique not only gave birth to magic resistance at this moment, but also gave birth to the characteristic of magic absorption from the stimulation of magic energy. In other words, the ability to manipulate energy can absorb even magical energy in addition to the newly awakened spiritual energy. No one can harm him with the same move and the same ability. After Su Chen's evolution, the sluggish cell activity was greatly recovered. At this time, a red-robed mage had already killed the moment he was bound. Su Chen sneered. At this moment, a pair of black and white eyes glowed with red light. In an instant, a bright laser beam came out through the eyes and penetrated the body of the mage figure. Baron Mordo could no longer maintain this magic. Feeling a little weak in spirit, he felt that the magic power was unsustainable, and directly removed all the clones in the air. The magic rope disappeared, but at the moment when he lost his bondage. Boom! A sonic boom suddenly sounded from the mountain in front of him, and Su Chen's figure flew like a cannonball. "You're going to get me off." He had long seen this red-robed mage, who was above the sky and overlooking others, was extremely upset. At this time, the figure flew out, and Su Chen, who raised his right fist, completely shattered the multiple magic barriers outside the opponent's body. Then, the figure of Baron Mordo suddenly fell straight down from the air like a meteor, and hit the ground heavily. From a high posture above the air, being smashed to the ground, this kind of taste is naturally uncomfortable for Baron Mordor. But, for Su Chen, he also felt very sick and bored in his heart. On the road to revenge, the gate of Striker's secret base is right in front of him. But inexplicably, he provokes an unknown magical force, which actually came to destroy himself. And the reason for all this is just because I am a grudge for my friend Mingdi. I just swallowed up the power of that evil god completely, but you guys will clean up my evil spirit. This is the most annoying place for Su Chen. The clay figurines still have 3 points of anger. For no reason, he was mistakenly recognized as the body of the demon god, and he wanted to destroy his whole body and raise his ashes. This kind of groundless accusation is simply an unfounded charge. How can Su Chen, who has experienced a lot of suffering, endure this qi? And why should he endure this aggrieved air? The tenderness that Su Chen has accumulated over the past few days is gone. The handsome face with sharp edges and corners once again showed an extremely indifferent and ruthless taste, just like the boy who walked out of the nuclear explosion that day. "Die all to me," he said coldly. It's like the death god is pronouncing the sentence, and Yama is calling for his life. In the darkened state, Su Chen's long-suppressed resentment motivated a mysterious power in this way. A terrifying force interfered with reality and tampered with everything around it. In a blink, something's wrong. Do not. The red-robe mages yelled in panic. They spread their hands, and saw that their arms were continuously decomposing. The flesh and blood disintegrated completely at this moment, and it turned into a pile of powder, floating in the air. Just for a moment, just now, the majestic and murderous temple mages suddenly cried and howled. Tell me now, am I qualified to devour the power of the demon god? Am I being ostentatious? So the will of a demon god who comes here is nothing, it makes you feel that it is impossible to complete it. I don't know that your existence is as small as an ant to me. Su Chen mocked coldly. The mages who were still hanging on the scene looked completely ashamed at this time. It's my fault. Help me. In desperation, they couldn't help begging for mercy from the ridiculed object just now. Unfortunately, without a trace of magical power fluctuations, without a sign of energy, under the terrifying reality of interference, these figures in front of them disintegrated in panic, and then turned into smoke and dissipated into the air. The surrounding environment changed even more, and the dreamlike mirrors were once again stacked in all directions. Only this time, there was a loud clicking sound, countless cracks spread all over the mirror surface, and the entire mirror space was completely shattered at this moment. After losing the supply of magical power, the mirrored space that had been changed from heaven to earth disappeared. 1, 2, 10. Counting the many mages that had been lost before, a small team member led by Baron Mordor was wiped out. Baron Mordor's complexion changed drastically. At this moment, he took a few deep breaths, and continued to strengthen his vitality, trying to resist this force, but the malaise fluctuations continued to spread in his body. In a blink, his hands also began to disintegrate, and under the ruthless obliteration of modifying reality, he could not continue to support it. At this moment, Baron Mordor looked at the indifferent boy in front of him, and he finally realized that he had provoked someone who shouldn't be provoked. This guy can actually swallow a ray of the will of the demon god that descends. Reminiscent of the rapid passing of his magic power before, his face was pale and he only felt the most ruthless mockery. He hates it. I didn't expect this time to wipe out the will of the demon god, it turned out to be a false proposition. And a child provoked for this has such a terrifying power. Such an astonishing killing intent was pervading his body even more. This is really not the reincarnation of the devil. It's a pity that you killed them, the people who killed our Kamataj. Kid, you are the one who shouldn't be offended. Baron Mordor, who was so embarrassed and angry, roared completely while he was still alive. When the guardian of the earth, sorcerer supreme ancient one returns to the earth, it is when you are judged. At that time, whether you have been corroded by the demon god, whether it is a demon outside the dimension, we will naturally know everything. Them, that Mordor said did not include himself. When his whole body disintegrated completely, a voodoo-like puppet was turned into a voodoo puppet. Under the power of reality, the doll completely collapsed. Su Chen frowned. He felt that he did kill him, but his subconsciousness also told him that the other party seemed to use some dark magic to make this puppet die for him. Guardian of the Earth, Sorcerer Supreme, outside of the Earth. Su Chen gritted his teeth with an indifferent expression. He had never heard of these names. Superheroes have been passed on by word of mouth, but they are very familiar, but Su Chen has only learned about the existence of magic in this world since today. Can their leader be hired outside the Earth, in the dimension? What shit, Guardian of the Earth, there really is such an existence, why will there be wars in the world, and tens of millions of lives have disappeared like this? If there is a Guardian of the Earth, wouldn't he be willing to protect me, and even other mutants who suffer, just let humans slaughter them like this? If you are truly a guardian, but you don't want to open your eyes and look at us, then what is the difference between you and the devil? Su Chen's mood grew darker. Because he really felt that he had suffered malice from the whole world. It was not him who was clearly wrong. What Mingming did before was a good thing. He successfully avenged Mindy and Dad and completely eliminated the underworld Emperor Jin Mei who exploited and enslaved many people. But inexplicably, in this way, he was regarded as the existence of the evil spirit body. Could it be that he was willing to be flooded into his head by the disgusting will that came? Obviously he had already swallowed it. Why these people still have to trouble themselves again and again? This must be the malice of the world. Su Chen, who was thinking more and more angry, only felt that his mind was getting darker, and in the blink of an eye, a withering force spread so quickly in the secret base in front of him. Stryker will set up your secret experiment base, just like that built in the interior of a mountain. Just like this, a metal back door was dug out on the top of the waterfall in front of me, and under the erosion of water splashes, there were already traces of rust. The fight in the mirror space just now didn't interfere with the outside world at all, so it didn't attract the attention of the insiders at all. But, from this moment, as Su Chen's mood grew darker, a terrifying withering force began to take the lead in the secret base. What? The complexion of a person who was still patrolling all over his body suddenly changed. He suddenly found himself evaporating like a snowman in the sun. In a blink, his figure just faded and collapsed, turning into a handful of gray smoke and dissipating in the air. Do not. 1 past 10, 10 past 100. The people in the secret base could not see the enemy at all, so they were obliterated by the terrorist forces interfering in reality in an instant. Puff! A body of flesh and blood just collapsed. The panic cry spread throughout the entire base, and the secret base for researching and dissecting mutants was reduced to a purgatory on Earth. Click. The metal gate located at the top of the waterfall was twisted into a mass of scrap iron with a force, and Su Chen, wearing a black hood, walked in with no expression on his face. Despair. The sound of his footsteps echoed all around the base. A full depth of tens of meters without any sign of stopping, the entire experimental base has not even sounded the alarm. Control room. Even the restrooms and dormitories were empty. Soon, Su Chen's figure just came to a large experiment room. Under the power of a thought, the steam valve that required multiple procedures to open was distorted and shattered. In the experiment room, many research doctors in white coats were imprisoned in the air by a force at this time, and their feet were off the ground, struggling in the air like a drowning person. Really you? Everyone was shocked. Only the number 1 mutant who emerged from the nuclear explosion can directly take the lives of a large number of people silently. Su Chen glanced at them blankly. The reason why they temporarily left their lives was not because they kept them crying and wailing. There was a strange ripple in his eyes. In my mind, a wave of psychic fluctuations rippled out, and it flooded into every experimenter's head one after another. In an instant, A bunch of memory fragments were quickly read by Su Chen like a waterfall of information. After the battle with Professor Charles and the Phoenix female Piano Gray, the power of the spirit skyrocketed, and the genes of infinite evolution also found the direction of transformation in the field of the spiritual level. Ever since, he not only has the means to restrain the power of the soul, it also generates some abilities such as telepathy, mind reading and so on. A group of experimenters in white coats suddenly opened their eyes and foamed at their mouths, and their minds were turned upside down by the force of the psychic force that broke into them. Su Chen, who had collected useful information, raised his eyebrows. With a thought, a secret document in the archive flew into his hand from the side. Wow! He tore open the portfolio. The files inside contain various information about yourself. So it is. Soon, Su Chen understood why he was arrested. It turned out that during a blood test in a township hospital, someone found something wrong with the blood sample. The abnormally abundant cell activity simply exceeded the human limit. If the self-healing and terrifying cells can be successfully extracted, then the X-weapon program that has been following up will make a breakthrough. As a result, I was worried about this and started the escape life of my brothers and sisters. After that, Su Chen's genes began to change quietly, until he was arrested and rage was completely out of control, and the entire gene began to change continuously. Do not. In the next second, the experimenters who had no use value immediately covered their necks, and a force of forbidden hoop surged, and in the blink of an eye, they snapped their necks completely. X-weapon. Su Chen's gaze then fell to the surrounding tanks of the nutrition pond. These sinks all have a body placed in them, and their bodies are filled with pipes. While supplying nutrients, they also quietly altered their genetic changes. They can even implant up to multiple X genes in their bodies. Among them, Su Chen has already seen it. Looking at these X weapons that had not yet been hatched, Su Chen had subconsciously destroyed it completely, but suddenly recalled Mindy's words. You need more power. Single quote. For a time, multiple invisible mental tentacles suddenly appeared in his mind, and they instantly pierced into the minds of the figures in these sinks. Their consciousness was completely obliterated, and they became their own spiritual puppets instead. At this moment, the figure in the sink suddenly opened his eyes. Su Chen found that he could still control them like an arm. It's not bad. Spiritual puppet. Like an arm dictated, letting the puppet under his control. Although for Su Chen, the X-weapon can't get too many Dharma eyes, but it definitely has the deterrent power for others. The X-weapon in front of him combines the abilities of teleportation, laser eyes, and rapid self-healing. The existence that supports the entire X-weapon is undoubtedly the self-healing factor inherited from Wolverine. It can be said that the existence in these nutrient tanks are all copies of Wolverine. Logan. Su Chen remembered the relevant name mentioned in the secret document. Even in the Snowfield laboratory in the past, he had heard of this name. After all, the immortal self-healing cells in his body were used to replace this Wolverine Logan's self-healing factor. He frowned. For some reason, Su Chen felt a sense of disgust in his own heart for the existence of this fellow sympathetic. This is very instinctive, something from the heart. Even the battle intuition gave birth to a sense of hostility. But in the past, he has not had any contact with the other party and didn't know him. But why is the mental reaction so strong? Have some problem. Su Chen believes in this feeling in the dark. After all, after the ability of the mind level is developed and transformed, this inexplicable intuition and illusion will definitely not go wrong. With a hint of confusion, Su Chen's figure has reached the basement level of the secret base. Through the long dim corridor, he can walk to the prison area. Inexplicably, at this moment, Su Chen also recalled that not long ago, he was pushed from prison by multiple guards into the experimental room for dissection. In a short period of time, I have already experienced many battles. Who would have thought that a gentle and peaceful elder brother next door more than a year ago, someone who couldn't bear to step on a flower on the grass, was forced by reality to become the most wanted extreme variant in the world, people. Returning to such a familiar experimental base, if not for his emotional out of control, the genes began to metamorphose and evolve. I am afraid, his current fate can only be reduced to a guinea pig that is constantly being dissected and slaughtered. And the immortal physique is more like a curse, so that one's life is not as good as death, and the whole life has to be reduced to perpetual motion machine-like experimental materials, providing unlimited anatomical data. Thought of it, Su Chen's mood became worse, and the killing intent in his mind became more and more pervasive. There are already clear plans for tomorrow's public executions. He just came to the prison area with no expression on his face. You are free. Click. As the weird power of thought fluctuated, the sound of chain breaking continued to be heard. Under the fluctuations of silence just now, Su Chen also deliberately left the lives of these poor people. The faces of the mutants in the prison changed, and they looked at this scene in disbelief. This moment, not only the iron lock of the concierge, but also the handcuffs that bound his hands and even the anklets around his feet, all disintegrated completely under an invisible and weird force of thought. Is this true? I'm going. Someone really came to rescue me. It's the X-Men. They must have saved us. This is the motivation for the Phoenix Girl. Hee, just them. I would rather believe that Magneto will save us than believe that it will only please mankind. A group of figures in prison clothes just walked out. They looked excited, but with a little hesitation. Only when he saw the boy at the end of the corridor, he was confused. No one guessed that the person who rescued them turned out to be a teenager. Is he alone? This person is. Oh my God, he is the #1 mutant. He actually came to save us himself. Suddenly, a tall young man just walked out. He directly recognized Su Chen's identity. Compared with other mutant compatriots who have not been exposed to the sun for a long time, their skin is pale, and they are extremely thin and undernourished. This guy is full of energy and seems to have been imprisoned recently. Are you detained recently? Su Chen said coldly. Yes, the striker arrested me when I went to a fast food restaurant a few days ago. The young man said very resentfully. Hear the words. Su Chen frowned somewhat displeased. He didn't expect that after Stryker was detained and examined, his secret base was still in operation, and he even dared to repeat the bad behavior before. These fools didn't seem to pay attention to their behavior at all. We must know that under the fishing boats of the world, many people regard General Stryker as the beginning of all evil, and the public trial held the next day also did a lot of superficial effort. But secretly, he was still doing such dirty things. Compared with these, the young guy known as the clone saw the doubts on everyone's faces and directly introduced Su Chen excitedly. He has achieved an achievement that the Magneto King could not accomplish in the past. He walked out of the nuclear explosion and knocked a lot of superheroes to the ground. The capital city even became his playground in battle. That's why he is called the #1 mutant. Wow. After the words were thrown out, people were immediately shocked. Beyond Magneto, to know that the recognized leader of mutants, besides Magneto King Eric, is Professor Charles. Both of them have very powerful abilities. But can the boy in front of him achieve an accomplishment that the extreme mutant Magneto could not achieve in the past? How old is he? Gulong. The sound of saliva swallowing sounded inexplicably. After losing their confinement, many people naturally rushed out of the base excitedly for the first time, but at this time the only corridor exit was standing like Su Chen. Everyone was shocked by his record, and they were so frightened that they dared not cross his figure, for fear that the other party would take their own knife if they didn't agree with each other. The name of the person, the shadow of the tree. When I thought that there was no noisy sound from the stairs above from beginning to end, the guards seemed to evaporate like this. I thought of the other's superb thinking power ability just now. Everyone's excited heart to escape suddenly calmed down. Boss, do you have any orders? The middle-aged man who almost jumped past the figure in front of him directly showed his waist to Su Chen, who was at least 20 years old in front of him, and got better. You are the mutant's hope. Our lives are yours, the great mutant king. You must have something to order. This doppelganger is a fan. At the same time, he also hoped to get instructions like, declare war on mankind, from Su Chen. A pair of longing pupils looked at Su Chen in this way, with a pious expression, as if he were regarded as a god. But at this time, a roar of words came from the special class cell in the deepest part of the prison. Who dares to slander the name of Magneto? Let me go out. I'm going to see which puppies dare to provoke the real king of mutants. Sky-shaking roars kept coming from the deepest part of the cell. Quickly let me out. I want to see who dared to provoke Magneto. Kang. The swaying sound of the chain kept clanging on the ground. It turned out that there is a separate underground cell in this prison area. This underground cell is not simple. The only outlet above the head is equipped with a heavy steam valve. The entire external alloy can even block electromagnetic fluctuations, which seems to be to prevent Magneto from coming to the prison. In the extremely spacious area inside, there were more than a dozen Edmund alloy ropes pulled out from the wall, and a massive figure was bound to its limbs in this way. Not only that, the nails matched with the alloy rope even pierced all the vital points of his joints, hindering the transmission of his power. Ordinary people have long been unable to bear such torture. But this monster is alive and well, and there is not much sense of malaise. At this time, he was roaring, struggling, and venting his dissatisfaction. "It's Hong Tan-K, his brain is a bit bad," the extremely enthusiastic clone suddenly explained. "This guy is a little stupid, hitting the wall with his head all day and night. Yeah, he is a lunatic. The brain's IQ is only over a dozen years old, anyway, it's just a dumbfounded person." Under the sound of discussion around. After being provoked, Su Chen raised his right hand indifferently and silently, and he held it tightly in the void. In an instant, a surging invisible force of thought suddenly penetrated the alloy wall. Click. In an instant, the chains tied to the opponent's body, together with the rivets running through the joints, broke apart. Good, very good. Under the roar, Red Tan Kane Marco, who had lost all imprisonment, immediately recovered his strength. His knees suddenly squatted, and under the terrifying explosive force, a head mallet that jumped in place hit the metal gate above his head with such a bang. An extremely conspicuous protruding mark appeared on the entire metal gate. Boom! There was another loud noise. The metal portal suddenly burst open, and a fierce and strong body just leapt out and appeared directly at the end of the corridor. Who just provokes Magneto's position? Kane Marco, wearing a stone helmet on his head and a pale blush on his face, walked straight from a distance angrily. The mutants around didn't dare to provoke the monster at all, and immediately rushed to the place against the wall, avoided the passage, and let the overbearing monster move forward. "It's you, kid." Kane Marco's eyes suddenly reflected a young figure wearing a black sweater. "If you can't beat me, even if you save me, I will beat you violently. I don't allow you to insult my boss." This guy is indeed a bit nervous, and his brain is not normal. The expression on the face under the stone helmet was a bit naive, and even the tone of the words was a bit lazy. Seeing the angry figure, Su Chen subconsciously thought he was fighting with the kindergarten kid. But, don't look at his expression and tone, but his physique is more than 2 meters tall, and the muscles under the prison uniform are so shocking that he doesn't dare to provoke him. Su Chen looked at him fearlessly. "For you, one trick is enough. Stop talking." At this moment, a surging thought-powered cannonball slammed into Kane Marco's body head-on. It was like Mount Tai collapsing from the air, and under a loud bang, the entire sturdy figure of the other party softened its knees and fell to the ground. Boom! The earth collapsed, and completely collapsed into a pit under the fluctuation of the downward pressure on the mind. "What?" Hong Tan-K roared, and the bulging muscles on his back continued to resist the pressure from the pressure, but the power of thought power was too terrifying. With another thud, his entire figure was completely thrown on the ground. Kneeling towards Su Chen in front of him. "Saving you and killing you were in my mind," Su Chen said coldly. However, he also noticed the unusual place of the other party. This guy's body was surrounded by light waves of magic power, unlike a simple mutant. Or maybe, the opponent is just a supernatural being mixed into the mutants. Crack! Kane Marco gritted his teeth, but his so-called indestructible physique just couldn't stand up. This man is a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, a loyal subordinate of Magneto. Regardless of his stupidity, his whole body is hard to destroy, his strength is almost inexhaustible, and he has a history of recovering from serious injuries many times. The Avatar explained to the side. And this fellow, who claims to be invincible and inexhaustible, is so dependent on the ground at this time that he can't move. I served. You are really better than Magneto. You are the real king of mutants. Hongtan Kane Marco yelled at this time, and said convincingly. Just now, the righteous, fierce and domineering spirit suddenly disappeared. At this time, he stretched out his hand to Su Chen, trying to get the others begging for mercy. You are my savior, you are very powerful, as long as you give me 3 meals a day, I will give you the work of your life. Sure enough, lack of intelligence. Su Chen's impression of this guy's stupidity became more and more profound, and it finally became clear why the prisoners around him had such a consistent view of him. Stupid, pig-headed, pig-headed. But the people around didn't dare to make fun of them, and most of them were holding back a smile. After all, the other party's arms were thicker than his own waist. Who would dare to provoke such a silly monster? 2 meals a day, okay, otherwise I won't have the energy to work. Mark seemed to see Su Chen's hesitation. Then you were full of intentions to avenge Magneto, but now you succumb quickly. The Avatar couldn't help but say. I only recognize who has a big fist, he is stronger than Magneto, and he is naturally the king of mutants. Hong Tan Ke is justified. His extremely low IQ head resembles an animal in nature. As long as he convinces it, he will naturally recognize you as the king. Su Chen really didn't bother to care about such a fool too much, and the surging thought power fluctuations disappeared. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.